Chapter 2491. Jun Kong's thoughts. The soldier that Jian Chen asked was a late overgod. He should have been a small leader here, so he dared not waste any of Jian Chen's time. He immediately replied politely, "Who else could it be? It's naturally the Taoist sect of divine sounds prodigy, Shangguan Mu." Jian Chen's face immediately changed slightly when he heard that. It became rather sunken as a cold light flickered in his eyes. Shangguan Mu was his wife. Now that a few large organizations were brazenly proposing marriage to her, it was quite an insult to him. However, the soldier failed to realize Jian Chen's change in expression at all. To him, Shangguan Mu's name seemed to possess a mysterious charm. As soon as he mentioned Shangguan Mu, undisguised infatuation appeared in the soldier's eyes. He looked in the direction of the Taoist sect of divine sound and said without stopping, "It said that not only is Shangguan Mu of the Taoist sect of divine sound a great prodigy, making it into the top 10 of the God King's throne 3 years ago, but she's also extremely beautiful, a great beauty who can steal the hearts of all men in the world. Just a single glance is enough for a man to lay his life down for her and give her everything." Of course, that's not all of Shangguan Mu's excellence. It said that she's the successor of a peak expert who had once shaken up the saint's world, the third ancestor, so she has unlimited potential. It's extremely likely for her to become a third ancestor in the future. And exactly because of that, Shangguan Mu has become a figure of desire for many peak sects on the Skyfire plane. They've tried all sorts of methods to establish ties and rope her in. Marriage is the most common method. I even heard that many peak sects on the Skyfire plane have gone to the Taoist sect of divine sound to propose marriage. There has even been organizations arriving on the Skyfire plane constantly from other planes, all going to the Taoist sect of divine sound to propose marriage as well. Then what's the Taoist sect of divine sound's attitude towards all of this? Won't they worry that Shangguan Mu already has someone now that so many peak organizations have come proposing marriage? Jian Chen asked with a rather ugly expression. However, the soldier shot a glance at Jian Chen as soon as he heard that, and his face stiffened. "Sir, there are some things you can't blabber about. Who do you think Shangguan Mu is? How is it possible for her to have someone? With her beauty and bearing, I really can't imagine who is worthy of someone as impressive as Shangguan Mu apart from legendary disciples of grand exalts in the vast saints' world." However, the Taoist sect of divine sound has been putting quite some thought into their responses. I once heard the general mention that the Taoist sect of divine sound seems to want Shangguan Mu to be with Jun Kong, and they're unwilling to wed her away. Humph. Jian Chen's eyes turned cold as soon as he heard Jun Kong's name, and he immediately snorted icily. He vanished with a flash, leaving with lightning speed. However, his snort seemed to be like a thunderous boom to the soldier, immediately deafening him as his soul constantly shook. So powerful. That's a primordial realm expert at the very least. When he recovered, the soldier stared in the direction that Jian Chen had flown off in. He was shocked and could not help but gasp. At the same time, Shangguan Mu sat within a cave, cultivating in the sacred grounds of the Taoist sect of divine sound. The zither of the demonic cry had shrunk to the size of a hand, hovering above her head. Deep, ancient music seemed to fill the entire cave. The music would specially target the soul. If weaker cultivators set foot in the cave, the music would steal their souls in an instant. This cave was called the Cave of the Demonic and Divine. It was where the third ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound had cultivated in the past. In the past, the third ancestor had a total of 3 places where she cultivated. They were the Cave of the Demonic and Divine, the Cave of Life and Death, and the Cave of the Myriad. It matched up to the 3 concepts that the third ancestor had created: the heart of the demonic and divine, the heart of life and death, and the heart of the myriad. Out of the 3 concepts, the heart of the demonic and divine stood as the highest. It was the leading concept. Shangguan Mu had spent most of her time in the Cave of the Demonic and Divine, comprehending the concept of the demonic and divine. She rarely ventured out. At this moment, the zither of the demonic cry turned into a streak of light and disappeared into Shangguan Mu. Afterwards, she opened her eyes slowly. "Junior sister, your senses are becoming more and more powerful. You sensed me as soon as I came, ending your cultivation. At this moment, a gentle voice rang out from outside. June Kong held a folding fan as he smiled, walking in from outside gently. In the past few years, June Kong had completely recovered from the setbacks he experienced in the Neptunian Divine Palace. He had returned to being that handsome, elegant Supreme God King. Confidence filled his face. This was because in the years he spent cultivating in the Cave of Life and Death, he had truly comprehended the heart of life and death. He had gained a basic grasp over the concept of life and death. Senior June Kong, why do you not cultivate properly and come disturb me time and time again? Shangguan Muir frowned. She had become slightly impatient with June Kong now. The Cave of the Demonic and Divine, the Cave of Life and Death, and the Cave of the Myriad were only separated by a single wall. As a result, June Kong would often enter the Cave of the Demonic and Divine from the neighboring Cave of Life and Death, interfering with her cultivation. It displeased her greatly. June Kong smiled radiantly. He did not mind Shangguan Muir's attitude at all. You can't say that, Junior Muir. Not only did Master send the two of us to where the third ancestor once cultivated to comprehend the heart of the demonic and divine and the heart of life and death, but he also wanted us to share our thoughts and experiences. After all, both the heart of the demonic and divine and the heart of life and death were created by the third ancestor. If we share our experiences and discuss them, there might be effects that we could never imagine. Shangguan Muir was not interested at all. She said coldly, Senior, please return. I want to keep cultivating. June Kong did not leave. He just sat down before Shangguan Muir and stared right at her breathtaking face. A sliver of extremely well-hidden desire and lust sprang up in the depths of his eyes. He had no intentions of showing what he was feeling. Junior, aside from sharing my experiences with you, I've come this time to tell you what my master wants to happen as well. June Kong paused before continuing. Junior, you must already know that many peak organizations from various places have come to our Taoist sect of Divine Sound to propose marriage to you. However, they've all been blocked by my master and the Wind Ancestor. However, these peak organizations have not given up. As a matter of fact, there are many organizations that don't belong to our Skyfire plane that have crossed through the vast cosmos just for you. The organizations that have come are becoming more and more powerful as well. Our Taoist sect of Divine Sound cannot afford to offend any of them, and even the Wind Venerable who spends most of her time in seclusion was forced to emerge as well. However, my master and the other ancestors all understand that this cannot continue in the long term. Our Taoist sect of Divine Sound won't be able to fend off the proposals from the large organizations for too long. Once someone decides to use force, not only will our Taoist sect of Divine Sound be unable to stop them, but we might even be doomed. June Kong became grim towards the end, acting like he was completely thinking for the future of the sect. I am already married and I have a son. Those peak organizations won't be able to swallow their pride and continue insisting once you announce that, said Shangguan Muir. June Kong shook his head. Junior Muir, you underestimate yourself far too much. In order to rope you in, those peak organizations really don't care about that. As for your so-called husband, I think those peak organizations will probably send people to hunt him down once they learn about him. After all, a backgroundless, nameless nobody, even if they're a supreme god king, won't be taken seriously by the peak organizations at all. It's not like women remarrying hasn't happened before in the saints' world. As soon as Jianchen dies, your remarriage will be set in stone. Shangguan Muir remained cold. Her expression did not change at all. She stood up and said icily, if that's the case, I'll leave the Taoist sect of Divine Sound and spare the sect trouble. She made her way out after saying that. Junior Muir, hold on. June Kong stood up in no hurry and said, Junior Muir, once you leave the Taoist sect of Divine Sound, it'll instead become even easier for you to fall into the hands of those large organizations. However, Master has come up with an idea that can make those peak organizations give up on their thoughts of marriage. That is for us to be together. Chapter 2492. Intoxicating Filter. Shangguan Muir paused after hearing June Kong's words. Disgust and great repulsion appeared in her eyes. If she still held onto any ties with Jun Kong, they had been completely severed at that moment. Is that what Ancestor Lian Qi wants? Shangguan Mu'er asked without looking back. Her voice was completely cold. Junior, Master's plan is all for your sake. Many peak organizations eyes you now. They're willing to stop at nothing. If you keep saying Jian Chen is your partner, Jian Chen will be killed off by people from those peak organizations. After all, it is impossible for a tiny figure with no background to receive any attention from those organizations. Jun Kong arrived before Shangguan Mu'er and said boldly, "But your senior's different. I'm a prodigy of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. If we're together, and we announce that we're partners, those peak organizations who eyes Junior Mu'er won't be able to say anything. After all, even if our Taoist sect of Divine Sound has declined, we're not a small sect that just anyone can trample over. Moreover, the Wind Ancestor's cultivation has already reached the peak. Once she breaks through, our Taoist sect of Divine Sound will stand among the ranks of peak organizations once again. Senior, you better give up on that thought. I will only have a single husband in my life, and that's Jian Chen. Even if my husband dies, I will never become the partner of someone else," Shangguan Mu'er said firmly. Jun Kong became filled with jealousy when he heard Shangguan Mu'er's determination. However, he did not show it. He sighed gently and said, "Junior, just what's so good about this Jian Chen? Why can't you forget about him?" Shangguan Mu'er said nothing. She just left the cave of the demonic and divine. Currently, she felt complete disappointment towards the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. If the idea had come from Jun Kong, her opinion of the sect would remain the same. She would still recognize the sect. However, the idea came from one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound, Lian Qi, which completely disappointed her. Staring at Shangguan Mu'er back, a sliver of resolution flashed through Jun Kong's eyes. He said, "Junior, since you're so heartless, you can't blame your senior." A dark red pill silently appeared in his hand behind his back. The pill was called the intoxicating filter. It came from his master, Lian Qi, who was one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. The intoxicating filter's only use was to drown people in lust. Its effects were extremely potent, having reached God tier. Let alone God Kings, even infinite primes and weaker chaotic primes would not be able to contain their lust once they became affected. They would lose their minds and be led around by their lust. Jun Kong held the intoxicating filtre as he stared straight at Shangguan Mu'er. He could not help but smile evilly before crushing the pill with a slight exertion of force. Immediately, a faint, red mist expanded from the intoxicating filtre. The mist moved extremely quickly, permeating the entire cave of the demonic and divine in an instant before spreading even further away. In just 3 seconds, all 3 caves were filled by the red mist. Shangguan Mu'er happened to be standing within it. The effects of the pill were astonishingly potent. In just an instant, Jun Kong was affected. His eyes became scarlet. "Junior, forgive me. I never wanted to do this either. It's just that I want you too much. After today, you are mine," Jun Kong said sternly as his breathing became heavier and heavier. The flames of lust lit up in his scarlet eyes. Shangguan Mu'er slowly turned around. Her eyes were clear, but they were extremely sharp right now. Clearly, she was not affected at all. The hand-sized zither of the demonic cry hovered above her head quietly, shining with a faint layer of light that enveloped her. She seemed to be standing in a different world within the light, allowing the red mist to permeate her surroundings. However, when it approached her, it did not affect her at all. Looking at Jun Kong, who was like a beast in the heat, a sliver of killing intent that had not appeared for many years flashed through Shangguan Mu'er's eyes. "It was bone-chilling," she said coldly. "Jun Kong, since you want to dig your own grave, I'll let you get what you want. We are no longer seniors and juniors from now onwards." Jun Kong's usage of the pill had completely angered Shangguan Mu'er. With a flash of light, the zither of the demonic cry transformed into the size of a regular zither in her hands. She gently plucked the strings with her slender hands. Immediately, an enchanting tune suddenly rang out. It seemed to be able to pierce anything and everything. When Jun Kong heard the tune, his body stiffened slightly. His eyes immediately became hollow, and it was like he had lost his soul and turned into a zombie. He was completely under the music's control now. The artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry had already awakened. Shangguan Mu'er had obtained the complete legacy of the third ancestor from the artifact spirit as well, so her grasp over the zither basically approached perfection. She could easily control Jun Kong completely. At that moment, without any exaggeration, Jun Kong had temporarily become Shangguan Mu'er's puppet. His soul was under her control. His fate was completely in Shangguan Mu'er's hands. Jun Kong let out a deep, bestial roar. Under Shangguan Mu'er's control, he directly flew out of the forbidden grounds. The Cloud Moon Peak was the mountain where all the female disciples of the Taoist sect of divine sound stayed. Towards the back, in a steaming hot spring, a bevy of women showed off their snow-white skin and slender bodies as they played around. Squeals and giggles would ring out from time to time. This was where all the female disciples bathed and cleaned themselves. At this moment, a figure shot over from the distance and stopped above the Cloud Moon Peak. He was Jun Kong. However, Shangguan Mu'er stopped controlling him as soon as he arrived. As a result, he regained control over himself again, but since he was under the influence of the pill, he was completely lost in lust. Like a beast in the heat, he hovered beyond the Cloud Moon Peak as he breathed heavily. He looked at the hot spring where the female disciples bathed towards the back and let out a deep roar as he directly rushed over like a bull. Chapter 2493. An ugly scandal. The formation of the Cloud Moon Peak immediately rose up. However, this was inside the Taoist sect of divine sound, so the formation was not particularly powerful. Its main purpose was to block off the senses of the soul and maintain privacy, so the formation shattered when Jun Kong collided with it. Jun Kong, having lost his mind, directly charged towards the hot spring. A series of cries immediately rang out when a man, Jun Kong, suddenly appeared. Many female disciples ran around naked as barriers of energy and armor appeared, covering up their bodies. Jun Kong has been blinded by lust. I will give you 10 seconds to leave. You should know what will happen after those 10 seconds. Shangguan Mu'er's voice rang out from above the hot spring. It was extremely cold. Her voice seemed to possess a mysterious charm, causing Jun Kong to pause right before he threw himself at a lady. He was under Shangguan Mu'er's influence again, and even his mind was temporarily controlled. He stood in the hot spring blankly like a fool. It's Senior Jun Kong. It's actually Senior Jun Kong. Quite a few of the terrified and frantic women immediately calmed down slightly when they heard Jun Kong's name. The light in their eyes flickered as they looked at Jun Kong with various emotions. There was infatuation in many of the gazes. Senior Jun Kong has been blinded by lust. The only way to save Senior Jun Kong is to, even if otherwise, Senior Jun Kong will suffer from an extremely terrifying backlash. Senior Jun Kong is the prodigy of our Taoist sect of divine sound, an expert of the God King's throne. He has even comprehended the heart of life and death out of the three supreme concepts. His future is limitless. We can't let anything happen to Senior Jun Kong. Some female disciples said. They were blushing and embarrassed. However, there was also some eagerness. Jun Kong possessed a handsome appearance, an impressive bearing, and astonishing talent and background. He had also comprehended the heart of life and death. With all these glorious features, Jun Kong had already become the Prince Charming in the eyes of many female disciples of the Taoist sect of divine sound. Many of them were infatuated with him, and it was to the point where they would offer themselves up without any hesitation at all as long as Jun Kong asked for it. As a result, a few of them realized an opportunity had presented itself when they saw that Jun Kong had become blinded by lust. In the end, over a dozen people chose to stay out of over 100 female disciples. Even if this disgraces me, I won't regret it as long as I can become Senior Jun Kong's woman. What are you blabbering about? What disgracing yourself? Can't you see that Senior Jun Kong is under the influence of something? If we don't save him, the consequences will be horrendous. We're saving Senior Jun Kong like this. A few female disciples discussed softly in the hot springs. They all understood the consequences of remaining, but none of them would regret it. Shangguan Moor hovered beyond the Cloud Moon Peak emotionlessly. Her enchanting eyes shone with cold light. After seeing how there were still a few women who refused to leave after the 10 seconds had elapsed, she did not try to persuade them. She just released her control over Jun Kong. The 10 seconds were more than enough for them to escape. They would have been long gone if they wanted to leave. Now that they had chosen to stay, whatever happened next would have nothing to do with her. Without Shangguan Moor's control, Jun Kong immediately let out a roar and launched over. During that time, a female disciple tossed out an embroidered umbrella. The umbrella immediately expanded to a size of several hundred meters, covering up the entire region. At this moment, a group of high-ranking members of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound were currently receiving important guests in a discussion hall on the main peak. The discussion hall was actually a medium-quality god artifact, and its interior seemed like a completely different world. The Taoist sect of Divine Sound had set up an extremely great scale to welcome them. Not only were 3 of the 4 ancestors present, but even the current sect master and all the primordial realm elders were here as well. Such a large scale just to welcome a few people rarely happened in the sect's history. This was because the guests they received this time possessed extremely great statuses. They were from one of the few Archean clans in the Saints' world, the Tao clan. Organizations referred to as Archean clans, without a single exception, had existed since the previous aeon and had given birth to a Grand Exalt in the previous aeon at the very least. Moreover, they would possess the Grand Exalt's legacy, peak god artifacts, and a supreme expert only second to Grand Exalts. Only when all those conditions were fulfilled could they be referred to as an Archean clan. As a result, perhaps there were quite a few ancient organizations that had survived since the previous aeon, but ones that could truly hold the title of Archean clan were mythical existences. Every single Archean clan possessed a deterrence in the Saints' world only second to the Grand Exalts. A total of 5 people had come from the Tao clan. If Jianchen were present, he would definitely recognize that the 5 of them happened to be the group who had arrived after he came to the Skyfire Plain. They were the handsome young man, the 2 accompanying primordial realm experts, and the 2 female attendants. The 3 ancestors and all the elders of Taoist sect of Divine Sound accompanied them carefully. Even though they knew that the young man only came from a branch family of the Tao family, they did not dare to waste any of their time at all. At this moment, the 3 ancestors frowned. As ancestors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound, they possessed partial control over the Divine Hall. However, they realized at that moment that someone had touched the Divine Hall outside. This was an alert for urgent matters that they had set up. Unless something extremely urgent had happened, the disciples outside definitely would not disturb them. One of the 4 ancestors, Lian Qi, immediately looked at Guna. Guna understood and immediately sent the senses of her soul outside to check on the situation. Ancestor, something bad has happened. Something huge has happened with the Cloud Moon Peak. A God King disciple reported in a hurry outside. Guna immediately extended the senses of her soul to the Cloud Moon Peak, but in the next moment, her face changed drastically. It became filled with shock. She could no longer remain composed and jumped to her feet. She did not even tell the people of the Tao clan that she was leaving before vanishing in a flash. Everyone in the hall was extremely surprised by Gu Na's hurried departure. The 2 other ancestors, Lian Qi and Deng Wenxin, could not help but expand the senses of their souls as well, but their faces changed drastically as well very soon. Preposterous! The ancestor, who was only second to the wind ancestor in terms of strength and status, Deng Wenxin, immediately called out furiously. She left the divine hall in a hurry. Shangguan Moor carried the zither of the demonic cry as she hovered coldly outside the Cloud Moon Peak. She did not leave. At this moment, there was a flash beside her and Guna arrived there. Even though Guna looked middle-aged, she was still attractive. However, at this moment, her face had become pale from anger as her chest heaved. She stared right towards the back of the Cloud Moon Peak. In the next moment, Lian Qi and Deng Wenxin arrived as well. Deng Wenxin had a long face. Her expression was as ugly as possible and extremely sunken. As for Lian Qi, his gaze flickered with uncertainty. It's the intoxicating filter. Gu Na gritted her teeth as she was extremely furious inside. It was to the point where her entire body trembled. I never thought a scandal like this would happen in our Taoist sect of divine sound. It is our misfortune. It is our misfortune. Deng Wenxin was both distressed and disgusted. Even though everything on the Cloud Moon Peak was covered up but a large umbrella, they could still see what was happening with there as chaotic primes. This was utterly humiliating to the Taoist sect of divine sound. More and more god kings gathered over here. Even quite a few elders in the discussion hall hurried over. To prevent even more people from learning about this, Deng Wenxin waved her hand and cast down a barrier, blocking off the scene from everyone. Mu'er, what is this about? Lian Qi stared at Shangguan Mu'er with an ugly expression and asked like he was interrogating her. He had secretly given the intoxicating filter to Jun Kong, but he believed that even if Jun Kong used it, it would only be in the cave of the demonic and divine. Such a matter would have never happened. Chapter 2494. Leaving the sect, Jun Kong crushed a pill in the cave of the demonic and divine. He clearly wanted to use underhanded methods against me, but he underestimated me. He didn't know that I could defend against such pills, so he obviously failed in the end and doomed himself instead. Shangguan Mu'er told the truth. Her voice was extremely cold. As a matter of fact, she showed no respect at all. Clearly, she no longer had any good impression of Lian Qi. As if he did not hear the change in Shangguan Mu'er's tone, Lian Qi continued to stare at the Cloud Moon Peak with an ugly expression. He said sternly, "Mu'er, you should have some method of controlling the effects of this pill. Why don't you help out your senior Jun Kong?" Lian Qi's voice was filled with blame and displeasure. Jun Kong's behavior would greatly affect both the Taoist sect of divine sound and him. Perhaps in the future, the Taoist sect of divine sound would be reduced to a laughingstock on the Skyfire plane. He had it coming, so why should I stop him? He's despicable for using such underhanded methods against me. If it weren't for the fact that we share the same sect, Jun Kong would already be a dead man, Shangguan Mu'er said coldly, and a faint sense of killing intent radiated from her. Not only did she mention fearlessly how she could have killed the supreme prodigy that the Taoist sect of divine sound had raised through great difficulties before the three ancestors, she did not even disguise her killing intent. This was more than enough to show just how furious Shangguan Mu'er was inside. Mu'er, Lian Qi's face changed slightly, and he glared at Shangguan Mu'er. Lian Qi's mood had already become horrible from Jun Kong's repulsive actions. And now that Shangguan Mu'er argued back with no respect for her elders, Lian Qi was extremely furious. However, he did not touch Shangguan Mu'er. After all, she had obtained the third ancestor's legacy. Even though she was technically his junior, her status was significant as well. As the only successor of the third ancestor, even if she committed some heinous crime within the Taoist sect of divine sound, probably no one would dare to punish her. This was because if the successor of the third ancestor successfully matures, she would definitely become a supreme figure of the sect. Her will would represent the entire Taoist sect of divine sound, and every single action from her could determine the fate of the entire sect. Lian Qi, shut up. Deng Wenxin, who was only second to the wind ancestor in the Taoist sect of divine sound, spoke. She said with absolute authority, "Lian Qi, Jun Kong is your disciple. You hold direct responsibility for his despicable actions today. Immediately go find all disciples that know about this. We can't let news of this scandalous matter spread." "Then should we stop Jun Kong?" Gu Na asked and looked at Deng Wenxin. Deng Wenxin sighed gently. "He has been poisoned by the intoxicating filter. The poison is extremely potent, and it can only be purged from his body through this method. If we stop him now, it will destroy him." Whatever. It has been so many years since our Taoist sect of divine sound has gained an outstanding disciple who comprehended one of the three great concepts. If we just destroy him like this, it would be a huge pity. Moreover, it has all already happened. Even if we destroy Jun Kong, it won't amount to anything. We'll make Jun Kong accept the dozen or so female disciples who offered themselves up to him. Deng Wenxin's words determined Jun Kong's fate. In terms of accepting the female disciples, It was obviously accepting them as partners. However, unbeknownst to Deng Wenxin, her decision made Shangguan Mu'er no longer reluctant to leave. At this moment, the barrier that Deng Wenxin had cast down suddenly distorted, and a crack the size of a door ripped open. The group of people from the Dao clan walked in. A fist-sized orb hovered above their heads, enveloping them in a layer of light. The orb was clearly a god artifact with special powers. Powered by the two infinite primes, it opened a hole in Deng Wenxin's barrier. The arrival of the group immediately caused the expressions of Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, and Lian Qi to change. Right now, they were just about to leave. They sensed that the situation was not good. The three of them subconsciously wanted to forcefully drive out the five of them, but they did nothing in the end as soon as they thought of their background. I wonder what's going on that has made the seniors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound so frantic? If there are any difficulties, our Dao clan is willing to help out for the sake of Miss Shangguan Mu'er, said the young master from the Dao clan, Dao Gongming, with a chuckle. He looked around curiously. However, the expressions of the two infinite primes who followed him became rather strange. There was some surprise. Young master, look over there, an infinite prime told Dao Gongming secretly. With that, Dao Gongming immediately expanded the senses of his soul and enveloped the cloud moon peak. In the next moment, he became extremely fascinated. Haha, interesting. Truly interesting. I never thought the Taoist sect of Divine Sound would really put on such an interesting show. This trip really was worth it. It really was worth it. Dao Gongming laughed aloud and continued, if I am seeing things correctly, that should be the prodigy of your Taoist sect of Divine Sound, Jun Kong. Tithise, I never thought Jun Kong would actually have such interests. Do you think that your Taoist sect of Divine Sound would be utterly disgraced if I spread this matter? Please keep it a secret, Lian Qi said as his face became utterly sunken. Dao Gongming stared towards the cloud moon peak. The scene made him feel a burning sensation inside as he became rather restless as well. He sniggered and said, of course I can keep it a secret. Hurry up and agree to my marriage proposal to Miss Shangguan Mu'er. From today onwards, I, Shangguan Mu'er, formally leave the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. The Taoist sect of Divine Sound no longer has anything to do with me, and the Taoist sect of Divine Sound has no power over me at all. At this moment, Shangguan Mu'er spoke up from one side. Her eyes were cold and her voice was firm. Clearly, she was truly ready to leave the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. As for the support that the Taoist sect of Divine Sound has provided me in the past years, I will definitely return it manyfold if I become accomplished in the future. Mu'er, what are you blabbering on about? Mu'er, how can you say something like that? Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, and Lian Qi were all surprised. They were ancestors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound, so they treated the sect with more importance than anything else. They could lose anybody except for the only successor of the third ancestor. However, Shangguan Mu'er also managed to attract Dao Gongming's attention with that. When he saw her breathtaking beauty and otherworldly bearing, he was completely stunned. It was as if his soul had been whisked away. You're Shangguan Mu'er, Dong Gongming said as infatuation filled his eyes. His heart had already been stolen away the moment he saw Shangguan Mu'er. Chapter 2495. Shangguan Mu'er takes action. I've toyed with countless women in the past, but none of them possess beauty as astonishing as Shangguan Mu'er. If she's compared to them, she's a goddess, while the women I played around with before were only mortals, thought Dao Gongming. He was overjoyed. He had not seen Shangguan Mu'er before. Everything he knew about her was heard from others. Even though he had heard just how beautiful the female prodigy of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound was, they were just rumors after all. All rumors would be exaggerated. As a result, although he was rather eager to meet Shangguan Mu'er when he came here, he did not hold particularly high hopes. His true intention was just to complete the mission that the seniors in his clan had given him. However, now that he had truly seen her, he discovered that she was even prettier than rumored. Just a single glance made him infatuated with her. Dao Gongming could clearly remember what his seniors had stressed before he had come here. Gongming, you have to remember that our branch is towards the weaker side in the clan. We're powerless a lot of the time, bound to the people of the main branch. Arranging your marriage with Shangguan Mu'er of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound is to save our branch from our current predicament. As a result, you must complete the mission and find a way to arrange a marriage with Shangguan Mu'er when you go to the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. Although Shangguan Mu'er is very weak, she's the only successor of the third ancestor after all, so her future potential is unlimited. If you can tie the knot of marriage with her, the status of our branch will rise significantly through Shangguan Mu'er's identity as the third ancestor's successor. We will receive the ancestor's attention. Shangguan Mu'er, I, Dao Gongming, will definitely obtain you. You will be mine, Dao Gongming swore to himself. The mission from his elders was no longer important. What was important was that he now desired Shangguan Mu'er. Young master, please return. I am already married, Shangguan Mu'er said coldly. However, when Dao Gongming heard that, he felt like his heart was pierced. If she was already married, that meant she already had a man. Dao Gongming inhaled deeply and forcefully calmed himself down. He refused to believe that Shangguan Mu'er was already married. Even if she was married, no one could stop him from obtaining a woman he wanted. You must be joking, Miss Shangguan Mu'er. Is there anyone who is worthy of someone as outstanding as you in the world? Dao Gongming said. Shangguan Mu'er no longer bothered talking to Dao Gongming. She bowed towards Deng Wenxin and Gu Na before flying away from the sect without looking back at all. Lien Qi's expression became extremely ugly when he saw Shangguan Mu'er leave with no reluctance and only determination. He had never thought the situation would develop into something so horrible. Miss Mu'er, please wait. Dao Gongming blocked Shangguan Mu'er and clasped his fist. I am Dao Gongming. I come from the Archean Dao clan. I sincerely invite Miss Mu'er to our Dao clan. I hope Miss Mu'er can grant us the honor. Having her path blocked, Shangguan Mu'er's eyes immediately turned cold. She said icily, "Move." However, her eyes possessed an enchanting charm that could steal souls. When Dao Gongming saw her cold expression, there was actually a different effect, making him even more infatuated. He became reckless as a nefarious flame surged up uncontrollably. Miss Mu'er, if you want to leave the Taoist sect of Divine Sound, you need my help. Otherwise, the sect probably won't let you leave. Miss Mu'er, let me take you away from here, said Dao Gongming. He glanced past Shangguan Mu'er, and the sense of desire within him grew stronger. He could not control himself and immediately wanted to grab her hand. Killing intent flashed through Shangguan Mu'er's eyes, and she immediately took a step back. She said coldly, Young Master Dao Gongming, please watch yourself. Dao Gongming was not angered at all when he missed. Instead, he sniggered and said, Miss Mu'er, don't you want to leave the Taoist sect of Divine Sound? And seniors of the sect, if you don't want me to make your scandal public, if you don't want to provoke the seniors of our Dao clan, just stand there obediently. You should know the consequences if you don't. Dao Gongming threatened the ancestors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound and extended his hand again, reaching towards Shangguan Mu'er's shoulder. Clearly, he had used some kind of secret technique with that gesture. Afterimages actually appeared as he reached out, and even the space there seemed to be affected. As a result, his hand seemed extremely slow, but it was actually extremely fast. Moreover, when he stretched out, a mysterious power wrapped around Shangguan Mu'er in an attempt to retrain her. Shangguan Mu'er remained completely composed. The zither of the demonic cry in her hands flew out and collided with Dao Gongming's hand. A heavy bang rang out from the collision, and Dao Gongming's expression suddenly changed. When his hand struck the zither of the demonic cry, he felt like he had hit an immovable mountain. Not only did he fail to knock the zither away, but his hand was even knocked away instead. His entire right arm grew numb. You're too weak. You're not my opponent, Shangguan Mu'er said indifferently. However, it seemed like mockery in Dao Gongming's ears. Dao Gongming immediately felt humiliated when he thought that he had been mocked by the woman he liked. Immediately, he began to laugh out of anger. It looks like it's time for Miss Mu'er to witness my true strength. With that, a powerful presence radiated from Dao Gongming. He formed a seal with both hands and began to use a technique. Immediately, the might of the world descended as supreme power gathered around Dao Gongming. Clearly, he was using a god-tier battle skill. Shangguan Mu'er held the zither of the demonic cry and plucked a string gently. Ding! A pleasant note rang out, and a miserable howl from Dao Gongming followed. His body shook violently as his eyes immediately became bloodshot. Even the god-tier battle skill was interrupted, forcefully stopped. My head hurts. My soul has been injured. My soul has been injured. Dao Gongming clutched his head and cried out in pain. The note that Shangguan Mu'er had played stabbed into his head like a sword. It caused him great agony, and he felt like his head was going to explode. Chapter 2496. Against a primordial realm expert. The expressions of the two primordial realm experts who had come with Dao Gongming immediately changed from Dao Gongming's howl. They both arrived beside him in a flash and pressed a finger against his forehead, checking his injuries. The expressions of the two old men immediately sank after that. They snarled and said, "His soul has actually been injured. Shangguan Mu'er, haven't you been too heavy-handed? If it weren't for the fact that I don't want your Dao family as my enemy, Dao Gongming would already be dead," Shangguan Mu'er said coldly. Dead? Shangguan Mu'er, you're far too arrogant. Do you really think you can look down on everyone just because you have the third ancestor's legacy? You haven't reached the limit of your potential yet. It's not time for you to be arrogant. Let alone the fact that you haven't reached the limit of your potential, even if you reach the same level as the third ancestor at the same time. Do you really think you can stand up to our Dao clan? Our Dao clan gave birth to a sovereign of the world in the previous aeon. How can we let a little kid like you provoke us? Since you've harmed out young master, just come back with us obediently and accept your punishment. The two primordial realm experts from the Dao family bellowed out. With that, one of the old men extended his hand without any hesitation at all. As the hand stretched out, the surroundings immediately surged. Powerful energy gathered over, condensing into a huge hand several dozen meters wide in an instant. It reached toward Shangguan Mu'er with the power of primordial realm laws. I would let it slide if you were a god king, but you're a primordial realm expert, yet you would stoop low enough to harass Mu'er, who's still a god king. The people of your Dao clan have gone too far, Guna said coldly. She could no longer just watch now that a primordial realm expert had taken action. The Dao clan is just far too arrogant. They don't even take our Taoist sect of divine sound seriously, harassing Mu'er in our sect. Moreover, she's the only successor of the third ancestor. Deng Wenxin was angered as well. Regardless of how Shangguan Mu'er felt about the Taoist sect of divine sound, she was still the third ancestor's successor in the end. They could not just stand by and watch a primordial realm expert harass her. Just when Deng Wenxin and Gu Na were about to take action, a voice rang out from the Forbidden Grounds, right inside their heads. Don't interfere between Mu'er and the Dao clan. We can't afford to offend the Dao clan right now. Even if they're only a branch of the Dao clan, they're beyond what we can afford to offend. The voice was extremely crisp and pleasant. It was rather obvious that the speaker did not seem to be very old. She was the leader of the four ancestors, the Wind Ancestor. The Wind Ancestor rarely showed herself, and she rarely interfered with the matters of the Taoist sect of divine sound. However, she was the person who possessed the greatest authority. Not only was the Wind Ancestor someone from the same age as the third ancestor, but her other identity was the third ancestor's senior sister. However, despite being senior and junior, there was a huge difference in talent and potential. Over 3 million years ago, the third ancestor had become an influential person only second to Grand Exalts, pushing the Taoist sect of divine sound to the peak and into infinite glory alone. However, the Wind Ancestor was still working hard on becoming a Grand Prime. Deng Wenxin and the others did not dare to disobey the Wind Ancestor. They stared at the primordial realm expert who had attacked Shangguan Mu'er, and they felt very helpless. The Wind Ancestor was right. The Dao clan was one of the Archean clans, possessing a supreme expert only second to Grand Exalts. They were a supreme clan that could shake up the entire Saints world. Even if it were just a single branch of theirs, it would be enough to destroy the Taoist sect of divine sound easily. Don't worry, nothing will happen to Mu'er, the Wind Ancestor's voice rang out once again. The hand condensed by the infinite prime from the Dao clan had already arrived. It clenched up and wrapped around Shangguan Mu'er in a flash. Shangguan Mu'er seemed like an infant from the outside, trapped in there helplessly. However, the hand of energy did not truly grab onto Shangguan Mu'er. The zither of the demonic cry shone with a hazy glow inside, illuminating the space there. All the regions the light reached seemed to become a separate domain that no foreign energy could penetrate. Shangguan Mu'er sat in the air. She gently plucked the strings on the zither with her slender, white hands, playing a beautiful tune. Every single note leapt out from the zither of the demonic cry with great offensive power. As she played the zither, notes filled her surroundings, constantly hurtling at the hand of energy. Immediately, the hand of energy around her began to tremble violently. The energy in the hand depleted at an extremely terrifying rate before collapsing loudly. It had been destroyed by Shangguan Mu'er's music. You really are the successor of the third ancestor after all. I've underestimated you. The old man who struck out snorted coldly. Originally, he wanted to take Shangguan Mu'er away. As long as they returned to the Dao clan, she would no longer be able to control what happened to her. Once what was done, everything would be much easier. However, he had underestimated Shangguan Mu'er's strength, allowing her to easily nullify his first attempt. It's the zither of the demonic cry. The zither of the demonic cry was a treasure bound to the third ancestor's life in the past. Gu Tong, be careful. Don't fail a simple task, the other primordial realm expert reminded. They came from Archean clans, so they knew much more than regular primordial realm experts. Gu Tong did not mind it at all and said, "It's no problem. That was only a casual attempt of mine. I refuse to believe that I can't capture a God King as a second heavenly layer infinite prime." Although supreme God Kings who ranked in the top 10 of the God King's throne could put up a fight against primordial realm experts or even kill them, that was only regular primordial realm experts. They would be the weaker type even among first heavenly layer infinite primes. Not only was Gu Tong a second heavenly layer infinite prime, but he also came from an Archean clan. He knew ancient secret techniques and battle skills. Although his battle prowess was not enough for him to claim invincibility at the same level of cultivation, he was much more powerful than most second heavenly layer infinite primes. As a result, he did not take Shangguan Mu'er seriously at all. He tried once again. Energy surged on him, and he reached towards Shangguan Mu'er again. However, he had clearly used his full strength this time. As his hand stretched out, the space there shook, and the landscape blurred. Before the hand was even fully stretched, a powerful pressure engulfed Shangguan Mu'er. Shangguan Mu'er did not retreat in the face of a primordial realm expert's attack. She sat in the air and stared at the zither of the demonic cry placed across her knees. She played it with great focus and concentration. It seemed like the zither was the only thing she could see right now, and there was nothing else apart from it. However, her body seemed to fuse with the zither as well. She seemed to be the zither, and the zither seemed to be her. At the same time, a faint tune rang out. Chapter 2497. An astonishing demonic tune. The tune was extremely strange. It was not pleasant at all and was hair-raising instead. It sounded like the howls of a million demons, the shrieks of countless ghosts, bail to pierce anything and stun the souls of people. It was a terrifying feeling. The second heavenly layer infinite prime Gu Tong experienced this to the greatest intensity. Shangguan Mu'er's control over music had approached perfection, so the special tune targeted only Gu Tong. As a result, although Shangguan Mu'er's tune rang through the entire Taoist sect of divine sound, no one apart from Gu Tong found it particularly horrible apart from being quite unpleasant and hair-raising. Gu Tong, who had been specially targeted by Shangguan Mu'er, did not have it as easy. As soon as he heard the tune, he immediately felt a piercing pain from his soul. It was as if countless ghosts had wormed into his mind, gnawing away at his soul. A sliver of pain appeared on Gu Tong's face. The piercing pain of the soul did not come from the body, so it was very difficult to endure it through willpower alone. Affected, his hand reaching towards Shangguan Mu'er slowed down slightly as well. It's the demonic tune of the two tunes of the demonic and divine. It's the demonic tune of the two great tunes. I never thought Muir's comprehension of the demonic tune would have reached such a level. She's only a god king right now. What talent, what talent! Muir is basically a reincarnation of the third ancestor. Deng Wenxin, Lian Qi, and Gu Na were all shocked at that moment. The three of them knew that since Shangguan Muir had inherited the third ancestor's legacy, she would comprehend the two tunes of the demonic and divine sooner or later, as they were the famed technique of the third ancestor. The third ancestor had used those two tunes to stand supreme in the saints' world and strike fear into the hearts of all the peak experts. However, they had never thought that Shangguan Muir's talent would be so great. Her deep comprehension of the two tunes allowed her to effect second heavenly layer infinite primes as a god king. The tune was faint and never-ending. Each note possessed a wondrous charm, penetrating through space and all other obstructions to reach Gutong's mind. At this moment, Gutong could not help but pull his hand back. His presence fluctuated as he tottered about in the air like he was drunk, staggering around. The demonic tune that Shangguan Muir played was simply too powerful. Even though she was nowhere close to the level the third ancestor reached in the past, she was able to threaten some primordial realm experts with the zither of the demonic cry. Gutong was no longer in the state to worry about Shangguan Muir. He clutched his ears tightly as a deep howl rang out from his throat. Not only did the demonic tune cause piercing, unendurable pain to his soul, but it also had a power that could stun the soul. As a result, Gutong became dizzy. It was as if he was no longer in control of himself. Gutong, what's wrong with you? The expression of the other primordial realm expert from the Dao family, Babu, changed, and he arrived before Gutong in a flash. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. Gutong actually sent a palm strike towards Babu. Energy surged in the hand as the laws condensed around it. It was a merciless attack. Babu was stunned. He had never thought that Gutong from the same clan as him would actually turn on him. However, Babu's cultivation exceeded Gutong's greatly. As such, even though he had been caught off guard by Gutong's sudden attack, injuring him would not be easy. With a thought, a low-quality god artifact appeared on him. Babu used the supreme defense of the god artifact to easily receive Gutong's palm strike. Muir's demonic tune can actually control second heavenly layer infinite primes. Yes. The eyes of the three ancestors who stood to one side widened. Shock was plastered across their faces. The strength that Shangguan Muir displayed had upheaved their understanding and knowledge of her again. Shangguan Muir, stop. After receiving Gutong's attack, Babu no longer paid any more attention to him. Instead, he arrived before Shangguan Muir with a flash and sent a palm strike towards her. He knew that Gutong was already under Shangguan Muir's control. The only way to save Gutong was to deal with Shangguan Muir. As long as the demonic tune was stopped, Gutong would return to normal. Shangguan Muir continued playing her demonic tune as her body floated backwards in retreat. At the same time, a layer of light shone from the zither of the demonic cry, enveloping her as a barrier. Bang! Babu's hand struck the barrier of light with terrifying force. A power that belonged to a mid-infinite prime erupted, turning into a storm that wreaked havoc in the surroundings. It caused the mountains to tremble. The screen of light around Shangguan Muir shook before shattering with a gentle sound. Shangguan Muir staggered backwards. Her face had become rather pale. Blood oozed from the corner of her mouth. Even the fingers that she used to play her zither were broken and were covered with blood. Babu was a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime, while Shangguan Muir was only a god king. The disparity in strength was far too great, so even the zither of the demonic cry could not make up for it. The power of the zither of the demonic cry could only be unleashed gradually once Shangguan Muir's cultivation reached a certain level. Besides, the artifact spirit of the zither had only awakened recently. It was still weak and was nowhere close to its peak condition. Disturbed, Shangguan Muir's demonic tune stopped as well. Gutong immediately returned to normal with that. As soon as he considered the fact that he, a mighty second heavenly layer infinite prime, had his soul controlled by a mere god king, he felt both humiliated and utterly furious. His face darkened from anger. This would definitely be a huge stain to his name, completely embarrassing him. He bellowed out furiously as his killing intent surged. His gaze was utterly shocking as a low-quality god artifact appeared in his hand. Clearly, Gutong had been completely angered as well, so he was planning to use his full strength. Babu shook his head gently when he saw how Gutong had almost lost all rationality. He placed his hand on Gutong's shoulder to stop him. He opened his mouth slightly, and just when he was about to say something, a loud voice suddenly rang out from outside the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. "I am Jianqin. I've come to visit the Taoist sect of Divine Sound." Chapter 2498. Jianqin visits. The voice boomed out like a bell, right towards the heavens, from the entrance of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. A powerful sound wave formed a visible ripple, surging through the mountains of the sect and shaking up all of them. It rang across the entire sect. "Who's this Jianqin? I've never heard of him. There are plenty of large clans and organizations who have come to our Taoist sect of Divine Sound to propose marriage. Jianqin is probably the young master of some large organization or clan." Many disciples within the Taoist sect of Divine Sound started to discuss among themselves. Only a few peak figures of the saints' world and some cultivators who possessed great information knew Jianqin's name. People like the regular disciples of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound had no right to know it. After all, it was impossible for people to come in contact with information from other planes without a certain level of status. When the three ancestors of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound heard Jianqin's name, their brows furrowed. Jianqin? Why did he come? Dong Wenxin wondered inside. She was familiar with Jianqin's name. Even though she did not completely understand everything about him, the mess he created on the desolate plain had shaken up the saints' world for quite a while. He was a mere god king. Even if he was a supreme god king, he was still an ant-like figure in her eyes. Despite that, it was exactly this puny figure who managed to elude the search of countless peak experts on the desolate plain for many years with the Enata Tower. Just that alone amazed Deng Wenxin. More importantly, not only did Jianqin elude the peak experts for so many years, but he even managed to successfully escape after being exposed and hunted down by all the peak experts. Now, he had come to visit the Taoist sect of Divine Sound openly, without any disguises at all. Not only did Deng Wenxin develop deep curiosity about Jianqin, but she also felt some admiration towards him. This was because what Jianqin did was unprecedented in the saints' world. Without any exaggeration, he had achieved a miracle. However, when Deng Wenxin thought about Shangguan Mu'er and Jun Kong, she felt troubled. Not to mention that the people from the Dao clan were still present. Of all the times Jianqin could come, he just had to choose now, which made Deng Wenxin uncertain whether it was good news that he had come or not. The three ancestors reacted differently to Jianqin's arrival. Meanwhile, joy appeared in Shangguan Mu'er's eyes. However, soon afterwards, her heart sank. Jianqin has actually come at a time like this. How am I supposed to leave now that he's here? Shangguan Mu'er became stern. As the master of the zither of the demonic cry, she had gradually learnt about a few of the zither's abilities. She was bold enough to publicly declare to the three chaotic primes that she would be leaving because she had the zither of the demonic cry. She could rip open space and leave with the zither of the demonic cry, and no one in the Taoist sect of Divine Sound could stop her. However, the problem was that it could only take her away. Originally, she could have left whenever she wanted, but Jianqin's arrival had completely thrown her plans into disarray. "Seal up the sect and forbid Jianqin from setting foot in our sect," Lianqi called out and passed down an order with a sunken expression. Due to Shangguan Mu'er, Lianqi did not have any good impression of Jianqin at all. As a matter of fact, he held great prejudice towards him. However, the formation around the Taoist sect of Divine Sound did not seal up the entire place like what Lianqi had ordered. Instead, it opened up, and a rainbow bridge appeared near the entrance, extending to near the Cloud Moon Peak. The Rainbow Path is the greatest welcoming ceremony our Taoist sect of Divine Sound possesses. Gu Na's eyes widened as she said in surprise. "It's the wind ancestor." Deng Wenxin's feelings were mixed. She turned around and glanced at the forbidden grounds of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. The rainbow path was specially prepared for when extremely important people visited the Taoist sect of divine sound. Each time it was used, it would need the permission of the ancestors. If they did not give permission, even the sect master would not have the right to use it to welcome guests. However, 3 of the 4 ancestors of the sect were currently gathered here, and none of them had passed down such orders. Who else could it be apart from the wind ancestor who cultivated in the forbidden grounds? This Jianchen really has received great respect to be welcomed with the rainbow path, said Gutong of the Dao clan strangely. Their Dao clan had also been welcomed by the rainbow path. After all, they came from an Archean clan, yet now, Jianchen, who only possessed some renown in the saints' world, had actually been welcomed with it as well. Obviously, he had nothing to say if it were some other time. Whether the Taoist sect of divine sound used the rainbow path or not had nothing to do with him. However, now that the Taoist sect of divine sound had done that while they were present, it basically meant that they placed Jianchen on the same level of status as the Dao family. This obviously displeased Gutong, and even Babu was dissatisfied by this. They felt like they were being taken lightly. At this moment, a figure stood on the rainbow path leisurely with his hands behind his back. He allowed the light from the path to flow, taking him towards the cloud moon peak. The person happened to be Jianchen. Currently, Jianchen stood there. His white robes fluttered as his long, loose, black hair danced in the wind. He stood on the path and seemed elegant. Lian Qi's expression became extremely ugly as he watched the figure on the path get closer and closer. It had become extremely sunken. Jianchen was definitely one of the people that he loathed and did not want to see. If it weren't for Jianchen, there would have been a great possibility of Jun Kong and Mu'er ending up together, thought Lian Qi. Jun Kong was his proudest disciple, someone he treasured greatly. He naturally hoped for Jun Kong and Shangguan Mu'er to end up together. Gu Na and Deng Wenxin both stared at the figure on the rainbow path. They had heard about Jianchen a very long time ago, but this was the first time seeing him. Even Gutong and Babu could not help but look at Jianchen. They came from an Archean clan and had great access to information. They knew about the major and minor happenings in the saints' worlds, so they had heard about Jianchen's name a little. Is this the person who upheaved the desolate plain? Gutong and Babu thought to themselves when they saw the elegant, composed Jianchen. However, Shangguan Mu'er's gaze became extremely mixed. The energy of the world here is in disorder. The battle happened. At this moment, Jianchen's eyes narrowed. As a primordial realm expert, he rapidly sensed the difference in the space there. He subconsciously locked his eyes onto Shangguan Mu'er. Immediately, he saw Shangguan Mu'er's pale complexion, the traces of blood on the corner of her mouth, and her bloody fingers. Jianchen's face suddenly changed. They became utterly piercing as if sword intent was hidden within them. It was a chilling sight such that people did not dare to make eye contact with him. He was no longer in the mood to wait for the power of the rainbow path to take him over slowly. The laws of space pulsed around him, and he vanished in an instant. When he appeared again, he had arrived before Shangguan Mu'er like he had teleported. Mu'er, who injured you? Jianchen held Shangguan Mu'er's bloody hands painfully as his gaze became terrifying. His face was utterly sunken as heavy killing intent radiated from him, flooding into the surroundings. It interfered with the space there, seemingly turning that entire region of the sect into a domain of sword qi. Chapter 2499, Absolute Domination, the Primordial Realm? Jianchen has actually reached the primordial realm? Be it Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, or Lian Qi, they were all shocked when they sensed Jianchen's presence. From what they had heard, Jianchen was clearly only a god king, but now that they had seen him, he was not even remotely a god king. He was clearly a primordial realm expert. Moreover, his presence was so powerful that it definitely did not match any regular primordial realm expert. Impossible. This is impossible. How did Jianchen reach the primordial realm in just a few dozen years? Lian Qi struggled to accept this. Going from God King to the primordial realm was breaking through a major realm of cultivation. It only seemed like the distance of a single step, but countless young talents would be trapped at that stage for countless years. In fact, some god kings would never be able to reach that realm of cultivation. However, Jianchen used such a short amount of time to overcome the obstacles that trapped countless people. Not only did he reach the primordial realm successfully, but his presence even made him seem like he had reached mid-infinite prime. Just how does he cultivate? At this moment, both Deng Wenxin and Gu Na felt curious. "Jianchen, why have you come?" said Shangguan Mu'er gently. Her heart warmed up slightly when she saw Jianchen in his anger. She was no longer as cold as before to Jianchen. She became extremely warm. Jianchen clenched her slender hand tightly, causing her blood to dye his hand red. Even though Jianchen knew that these were only superficial wounds to Shangguan Mu'er, he still could not help but feel pained. "If I didn't come in time, I wouldn't even know if I would still be able to meet you. Mu'er, tell me who injured you. Was it the two of them?" Jianchen said gently, but there was killing intent in his voice that he struggled to conceal. Towards the end, he glared at Gutong and Babu, exposing his killing intent. Gutong and Babu both felt a strange chill from Jianchen's gaze. They felt like Jianchen's eyes were swords that stabbed into the depths of their souls, making them tremble. Gutong and Babu's minds immediately shuddered. They glanced at each other and could see the seriousness in the other's eyes. Even though they had not clashed yet, his gaze alone was enough for them to understand that the young man's strength was extraordinary. "Who are you?" "Let go of Miss Muir's hand." At this moment, Dao Gongming flew over from afar in a disheveled manner. When he saw how Jianchen was actually holding Shangguan Mu'er's hand, he was immediately infuriated. In his eyes, Shangguan Mu'er was already his and was fated to be his future wife. How could he allow an unknown man to make such close contact with her? With his soul injured, Dao Gongming was no longer clear-minded. He failed to sense Jianchen's presence. He only charged over furiously and directly attacked Jianchen. "Young master, don't." Gutong called out. He understood very well that the person before them was anything but simple. He arrived before Dao Gongming with a flash. "Piss off." However, he was too late. Jianchen bellowed out, and a light flashed with a wave of his hand. It turned into a streak of light that engulfed Gutong and Dao Gongming with intense sword intent. Gutong also wore a low-quality god artifact armor. The armor shone with dazzling light, forming a powerful barrier around him. He used his body to block the attack for Dao Gongming. The stream-like sword chi barraged Gutong, immediately causing the barrier of light from the god artifact to tremble. The energy in the armor drained away at an unbelievable rate. Babu became extremely stern when he witnessed this. Jianchen's strength had completely exceeded his estimations. "Jianchen, stop!" Babu bellowed out. He also wore a low-quality god artifact. With a sword in hand, he directly swung at Jianchen's stream of light in an attempt to save Gutong. As he knew Jianchen's strength now, Babu used his full strength. Even the sword in his hand was a low-quality god artifact. The Dao clan was an Archean clan. As a primordial realm expert of the Dao clan, even though he belonged to a branch that did not hold particularly great influence, he would not lack god artifacts. Jianchen's eyes turned cold, and he brought two fingers on his right hand together, directing them at Babu. Immediately, the laws in the surroundings condensed. Supreme laws of the sword revolved around Jianchen, directly shooting towards Babu after Jianchen gestured. With a dazzling flash of light, the sword chi several meters in length shot towards Babu in an unstoppable manner with light that illuminated the entire Taoist sect of divine sound. Babu's expression changed. He felt chills as he faced the sword chi despite being a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime. He felt threatened. How is Jianchen so powerful? Babu was shocked. He had heard about Jianchen before, but that was only limited to what happened on the desolate plain. The matters with the Gloomwater sect had not spread completely yet, so many people still believed that Jianchen was a god king. It all happened in an instant. When Jianchen's sword chi shot out, Babu quickly changed the direction of his attack. His god artifact that originally fell towards the stream of light was forced to receive the powerful strand of sword chi. Boom! A rumble immediately exploded from their clash. It was deafening. Violent energy wreaked havoc in the Taoist sect of divine sound like a storm. Deng Wenxin and the others took action in time, casting down a powerful barrier to contain the storm. They prevented it from impacting the rest of the sect. As chaotic primes, stopping the ripples of energy that erupted from battles between infinite primes would naturally be nothing difficult. Babu forcefully received Jian Chen's strike in the barrier, and his face changed immediately. A grunt rang out from his throat as he was blown away. The sword in his hands stopped shining. Even the god artifact armor on him dimmed. So powerful! Babu was in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. Only when he truly clashed with Jian Chen did he understand just how terrifying Jian Chen was. Babu struggled to even take on a single strike from him as a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime. If it were not for his armor, he probably would have been injured by the attack. However, even with the armor, his organs had been shaken up. Jian Chen, don't kill them, said Shangguan Moore. The strength that Jian Chen displayed shocked her greatly as well. However, she had come up from the Tianyuan continent with Jian Chen after all. She had personally witnessed the many miracles he had created in the past, so she accepted it very quickly. Chapter 2500. Returning the favor hundredfold. Jian Chen paused after hearing Shangguan Moore's words. He did not chase them down. Instead, he glared at the two infinite primes and asked sternly, "Moore, did they cause your wounds?" This time, Shangguan Moore did not try to cover for them. She nodded gently and said, "It's only some small injuries. It's no big deal." Jian Chen glanced at the pale-faced Dao Gongming, who had an injured soul. He had encountered many matters like this in the past, so he could naturally tell why Shangguan Moore had started fighting the primordial realm experts. He immediately sneered and said, if they were only god kings, I would consider letting this matter go. However, they're two primordial realm experts, yet they stooped low enough to lay their hands on you over a junior's matter. I can never just let this matter be. Since they've injured you, I'll return the favor 100-fold. Killing intent erupted from Jian Chen's body. He charged right towards Gutong, who stood before Dao Gongming, and directly threw a punch. The punch shone with dazzling light. Powerful sword chi condensed around the fist, causing space to tremble and distort. The air produced terrifying sonic booms. Not only did Jian Chen use the laws of the sword in the punch, but his strike even contained the laws of strength. As a result, the attack was extremely terrifying, enough to strike fear into people with a single glance. Gutong's expression changed drastically. He felt chills from the bottom of his heart as he faced Jian Chen's punch. He felt his life being threatened. Moreover, the punch had locked onto his presence, preventing him from dodging at all. All he could do was forcefully receive it. Gutong bellowed out, and his energy as a second heavenly layer infinite prime surged out like a tidal wave. He did not hold back at all. He channeled half of his power into his armor as he held a huge sword as wide as a hand. As an Archean clan, all the primordial realm experts who came from the Dao clan possessed plenty of low-quality god artifacts. Gutong's two-handed sword happened to be a low-quality god artifact. At that critical moment, he used the huge sword as a shield, placing the wide blade in front of himself. Boom! Jian Chen's punch struck the sword with devastating power, immediately causing the weapon to flicker with light. It trembled without any signs of stopping as it thrummed. It was like the artifact spirit was wailing out. Gutong paled. When Jian Chen's fist struck his sword, an unstoppable force passed into his arms. The force was so great that even with his low-quality god artifact armor, he struggled to protect himself. With a series of cracks, his two arms drooped down powerlessly. They had been shattered by the terrifying force, and the sword in his hand had been knocked far away as well, creating a huge crater in a nearby mountain. Jian Chen's fist continued onwards without slowing down. After knocking the sword away, it continued to advance with the same terrifying force. It shattered the protective energy around Gutong and struck his chest heavily with a deep thud. Spurt! Blood and pieces of organs sprayed from Gutong's. The armor on him rapidly dimmed. The god artifact was undamaged, but the terrifying force from Jian Chen's punch still managed to pierce through the defenses and land on Gutong. The defenses of the god artifact were very powerful, but Gutong was only a second heavenly layer infinite prime after all. The difference between them was just too great, so great that it could not be made up for with the god artifact armor. Gutong was knocked far away by Jianchen's punch, and Dao Gongming also cried out painfully after colliding with Gutong. He basically became stuck to Gutong, and they were launched far away together. Why did Jianchen suddenly become so powerful? The strength he just displayed is completely different from the rumors. That strike was already on the level of 6th heavenly layer infinite primes. That's unbelievable. The 3 observing ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound all sighed in surprise. If it were not for the fact that it had occurred right before them, they would have never believed that Jianchen had become a primordial realm expert in just a few dozen years and a great expert among infinite primes at that. They were all old monsters who had lived for millions of years. A few decades was only a blink of an eye to them. In such a short time, even if they managed to make any improvements, it would be almost insignificant. It would never be as impressive as what Jianchen accomplished. After all, the stronger they became, the more difficult it was to increase their strength. It would normally take millennia, several dozen millennia, or even hundreds of millennia before a breakthrough was achieved, especially after reaching the primordial realm. To them, going from just a god king to possessing the battle prowess of a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime in just a few dozen years was basically a miracle, a legend. Of course, they still did not know about how Jianchen had already killed a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime in the Gloomwater sect. Who knows what they would be thinking once they found out about that? Babu bellowed out to another side, "Stop. We're from the Tao." However, before he could finish speaking, Jianchen arrived in front of him as a streak of light. Using the laws of strength and the laws of the sword together, he knocked Babu away with a single punch. Despite being a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime with the support of a god artifact, Babu was still unable to block Jianchen's attack. Blood directly sprayed from his mouth as he rammed into and destroyed a string of mountains. Jianchen pursued. His eyes were cold, shining sharply like swords. Invisible sword intent permeated his surroundings. He extended a finger and gently waved it towards Babu in the distance. Immediately, a streak of light appeared. It was extremely small, like a strand of hair. It shone with bright light, appearing several kilometers away with a single flash. It struck Babu's body with supreme sword intent. Even though the strand of light seemed nothing special, it was much more powerful than Jianchen's previous 2 attack. This was because he had used the power from the ultimate way of the sword. With the ultimate way of the sword, even regular sword chi would become much more powerful in his hands. Boom! With that, Babu was blown away once again despite having only just regained his footing. This time, the injuries he received were even heavier. Blood constantly spurted out from his mouth. He had already become sheet white. As a matter of fact, a crack appeared on his armor near his waist. The low-quality god artifact had been damaged by the attack from the ultimate way of the sword. Chapter 2501. Running away. Even a low-quality god artifact had exceeded its limits and was damaged. This was more than enough to show just how astonishing Jianchen's attack was. Moreover, when the low-quality god artifact was damaged, an unstoppable power pierced right into Babu's body. The flesh near Babu's waist immediately became a bloody mess. He struggled to stand upright, as all his organs had been reduced to pieces. Jianchen's attack was simply too powerful. If it were not his armor, Babu would have been almost cut in half. No wonder Mu'er always longs for Jianchen and never wavers when she faces Jun Kong's courtship. Jianchen really does possess supreme, rare talent. His growth rate is so astonishing that he even makes me suspect whether he's the reincarnation of someone powerful. Gu Na stared straight at Jianchen and praised in amazement. So what if his growth rate is impressive? It's not like geniuses like that haven't appeared in the saints' world, but in the end, how many of them are truly able to reach the peak? Almost all of them die along the way. Lian Qi said to Gu Na secretly to express his disapproval. However, in reality, he too had begun to take Jianchen seriously. Jianchen isn't using a god artifact right now, Yet he already possesses the battle prowess of a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. It's rumored that he has a low-quality god artifact, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. I wonder what level he'll reach once he uses it, Lian Qi wondered as he became stern. At that moment, he no longer dared to take Jian Chen lightly because he also understood just how astonishing Jian Chen's growth rate was. Although Jian Chen's current strength still had not reached a level that he had to worry about, it would not take him long to reach such a level if he continued to grow at his current rate. Deng Wenxin stared right at Jian Chen as if she wanted to see his ins and outs. She said sternly, Jian Chen actually still does not plan on stopping. The people of the Dao clan cannot die in our Taoist sect of divine sound, or it'll cause trouble. I should stop him. To another side, sword qi condensed around Jian Chen as he shone with dazzling light. Just when he planned on continuing his attacks, Deng Wenxin arrived before him with a flash. Jian Chen enough. Deng Wenxin sighed gently with extremely mixed feelings. When the experts of the Dao clan attacked Shengguan Mu'er, their Taoist sect of divine sound was unable to stop them at all. They could only watch the only successor of the third ancestor endure the combined attacks of 2 primordial realm experts despite only being a god king. Yet now, when Jian Chen completely dominated and heavily injured the 2 primordial realm experts, she was forced to stop Jian Chen and protect them. Deng Wenxin felt extremely powerless over this entire matter. Jian Chen's face sunk. He could feel a tremendous pressure from Deng Wenxin. He felt like he faced a mountain. The threat he felt from Deng Wenxin was much greater than what he felt from Su Ran. As a disciple of your Taoist sect of divine sound, Mu'er has been harmed by outsiders, yet not only do you, an ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound, not protect her, you even assist those who harm her. Is this how your Taoist sect of divine sound treats your people? Jian Chen growled. He was extremely furious. Even though he had already heavily injured Ba Bu and Gutong, he was still angry. The Taoist sect of divine sound's actions disappointed him. He struggled to imagine just how severe the entire situation would have become if he had come even a day late. He might not have been able to see Mu'er ever again. Deng Wenxin sighed gently. Her face was filled with powerlessness as she said to Jian Chen secretly, Jian Chen, we hold Mu'er in great importance just like you. As the only successor of the third ancestor, Mu'er is directly related to the sect's future. Our sect naturally cares for her. However, these people come from the Dao clan. The Dao clan is one of the few Archean clans in the Saints' world, and they're too powerful. Our Taoist sect of divine sound cannot afford to provoke them, or not only will we fail to protect Mu'er, but our sect will even be destroyed in the process. The strength that Jian Chen had displayed gained Deng Wenxin's recognition. Afterwards, Deng Wenxin gave Jian Chen a detailed explanation of an Archean clan's strength such that he would possess a rough understanding about them. Jian Chen, just drop the matter here. Whether it's to the Taoist sect of divine sound or our Tianyuan clan, the Dao clan is a tremendous existence that we cannot offend. Shengguan Mu'er also arrived before Jian Chen. She tugged Jian Chen's arm with her bloody hands to stop him. She understood Jian Chen. She knew that if this continued, it would be extremely likely for him to kill someone, either a primordial realm expert or Dao Gongming. If that really happened, the consequences would be severe. The light in Jian Chen's eyes flickered, and the sword intent around him gradually dispersed. The Dao clan was just too powerful, basically no weaker than the heavenly palace of Bishing. They possessed a 9th heavenly layer Grand Prime. With his current strength, it was best if he did not completely offend an Archean clan unless he ran out of choices. Although he had heavily injured Dao Gongming and the 2 primordial realm experts of the Dao family, that was completely different from killing them. I'll spare your lives this time. If it happens again, I won't show any mercy. I'm not going to fear you just because your Dao clan is an Archean clan. You should know that I've already returned the Enata Tower, and you should understand what that means as well, Jian Chen said coldly. Ba Bu and Gutong were about to retort viciously, but when they heard what Jian Chen said at the end, they swallowed their words. Afterwards, they dragged their injured bodies and left in disheveled manners with Dao Gongming and the 2 female attendants. Dao Gongming looked back at Jian Chen and Shengguan Mu'er as he was taken away. His eyes were venomous. Just when he wanted to say something, his mouth was covered up by Gutong. Only when they were far away from the Taoist sect of divine sound did Gutong let go. Why did we leave? Why did we leave? Go back, go back. Go back and kill Jian Chen. I swear I'll have Jian Chen dead. We're a part of the Dao clan. We're disgracing the name of the Dao clan by running away. We can't be humiliated like this. Dao Gongming could not help but roar out once he could speak again. His eyes were filled with intense killing intent. Young master, calm down. Gutong's expression was ugly as well. As a primordial realm expert of the Dao clan, he was revered and respected basically wherever he went, where no one would offend him. However, he had suffered greatly in the Taoist sect of divine sound instead, which left him furious as well. However, there was nothing he could do. He said sternly, "Young master, Jian Chen's strength is extremely great. Babu and I can't defeat him even when we work together. Moreover, he has the heavenly palace of Bisheng behind him, making his identity different from before. Any mistakes might devolve into a grievance between our Dao clan and the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Are we just supposed to let the matter be? We're a part of the Dao clan after all," Dao Gongming bellowed out as he coughed up blood. "Matters connected to the heavenly palace of Bisheng is not up for us to decide. We need to return immediately and report this to the elders so that they can make a decision," Babu said sternly. Chapter 2502, Scandal Exposed. Then let's report the matter to the elders once we return. Since Jian Chen is bold enough to offend our Dao clan, we can never spare him, Dao Gongming said in resentment. As a young master of the Dao clan, even though he did not belong to the main branch, he still held an extremely great status. He was basically surrounded by admirers wherever he went. It would be glorious. However, he had suffered greatly in the Taoist sect of divine sound instead, and this was something that he struggled to accept. And there's no need to keep what happened between the Taoist sect of divine sound's Jun Kong and the female disciples a secret anymore. Spread it. Make it public. Doesn't the Taoist sect of divine sound care about its reputation a lot? I'll disgrace you, Dao Gongming said through gritted teeth. He had even developed resentment towards the sect after what he went through today. After the people of the Dao family left, Jian Chen gradually calmed down. The piercing light in his eyes vanished, and he showed a rare sense of warmth. Just when he wanted to talk to Shengguan Mu'er, his face suddenly changed, and he looked in the direction of the Cloud Moon Peak. Even though a female disciple had used an umbrella-shaped treasure to cover up the mountain peak, a mere medium-quality saint artifact was unable to stop the senses of Jian Chen's soul. As a result, the senses of Jian Chen's soul penetrated it easily and clearly saw everything happening there. What he saw surprised Jian Chen. He could clearly see an intense battle involving a young man and over a dozen women happening beside a hot spring with faint mist. It was a white mess, quite a sexual scene. Jian Chen was left tongue-tied. He felt shocked when he saw such a ridiculous scene in the Taoist sect of divine sound. Oh no! Discovering the senses of Jian Chen's soul, the expressions of Deng Wenxin, Lian Qi, and Gu Na all changed. Their attention had been completely drawn away by Jian Chen's battle against the primordial realm experts of the Dao family, so they temporarily forgot to cover what was happening on the Cloud Moon Peak. By the time they responded, it was already too late. Jian Chen had seen everything clearly. Deng Wenxin and Gu Na were worried that if Jian Chen learnt that Jun Kong had used underhanded methods against Shengguan Mu'er, he would become furious and create a mess. They were husband and wife after all. However, what Lian Qi worried about was that one more person, someone he loathed in particular, would learn about the scandal his disciple created. Lian Qi's expression became rather sunken. When he did all that he could to match Jun Kong with Shengguan Mu'er, he had already begun comparing his disciple to Jian Chen. In reality, he had always believed the disciple he raised would be more outstanding than Jian Chen, but now that he had seen Jian Chen, he had to admit that this man was indeed the best of the best. Comparing Jian Chen with his disciple would be like comparing the moon to a firefly. Moreover, now that Jian Chen had learnt about the scandal his disciple created, Lian Qi felt even more displeased. He immediately snorted gently. Some problems have occurred to one of our disciples during cultivation, which is why such a despicable scene has happened with his partners. I hope Brother Jianchen can keep it a secret. After all, this affects the reputation of our sect, said Deng Wenxin. With a wave of her hand, she cast down a barrier around the Cloud Moon Peak. She directly referred to the female disciples who stayed behind as Jun Kong's partners. Partners were also known as concubines. Their relationship was the same as husband and wife, except their status would be slightly worse than the formal wife. If something like this happened between husband and wife, it was justifiable at the very least. However, at this moment, after venting it all, Jun Kong finally broke free from the influence of the intoxicating filter and gradually recovered his reasoning. Although he had been under the influence of the pill, where all his actions were beyond his control and based on instincts, he did know what had happened. He glanced past the female disciples. Even though they all possessed beauty, he showed no joy at all. Instead, his face sank and his eyes were extremely cold. They were not what he wanted. What he truly wanted was Shangguan Mu'er. Arg! Jun Kong roared out as armor covered his naked body completely. He did not even glance at the women a second time and quickly flew away from the Cloud Moon Peak instead. First Senior, don't go. First Senior, where are you going? The numbing weak voices of a few female disciples rang out from behind. Within the barrier, Jun Kong hovered in the air as he stared at the pair that seemed to be made in heaven, Jianchen and Shangguan Mu'er. Deep resentment filled his face. Jun Kong, you've committed something so atrocious, yet you still have the face to come over? Why don't you leave immediately? Guna called out. Jun Kong was Lian Qi's disciple, but she was also Lian Qi's partner. As a result, she did favor Jun Kong slightly inside. She was afraid that Jianchen would learn about what Jun Kong did. Although this was the first time Guna had met Jianchen, she already knew a little about his past actions. Coupled with how merciless Jianchen had been with the Dao family, she truly understood his temperament. However, Guna's words allowed Jianchen to tell that she seemed to be hiding something. The light in his eyes immediately flickered as he sensed that something was amiss. It was as if the entire matter was not as simple as it seemed. Mu'er, did Jun Kong use any underhanded methods against you? Jianchen turned his head towards Shangguan Mu'er after a moment of thought. He already knew who Jun Kong was. He had actually done something so shameless with over a dozen female disciples of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound out in the open. Just that by itself was suspicious. Coupled with his venomous gaze, Jianchen thought of many things immediately. He developed doubts. Jun Kong managed to get a pill of intoxicating filter from somewhere. He originally wanted to use it against me, but he failed. Shangguan Mu'er was completely disappointed with the Taoist sect of Divine Sound, so she did not cover up the truth. She even explained the effects of the intoxicating filter to Jianchen in great detail. After learning about the entire matter, Jianchen's face immediately sank. The killing intent he had just dispersed erupted once again, except it was countless times heavier than before. Chapter 2503. Do you really want to fight me? Shangguan Mu'er was his beloved wife, yet someone actually dared to lay their treacherous hands on her. Moreover, it was through such underhanded means, which absolutely infuriated Jianchen. All outstanding women and men would have countless admirers, and this was especially so for beautiful women like Shangguan Mu'er. Jianchen would not be so angered if Jun Kong had openly pursued her, yet he just happened to use despicable means that even involved an aphrodisiac pill. This roused Jianchen's killing intent. Jun Kong's actions had already crossed Jianchen's bottom line. Seniors, do you plan on protecting Jun Kong despite the despicable actions he has committed? Jianchen asked sternly. His presence was pressuring as his killing intent surged. His gaze became utterly piercing. Even when he faced 3 chaotic primes, he felt no fear nor did he shrink away. He was ready to take them on if they did not give him what he wanted. This is an internal affair of our Taoist sect of Divine Sound. How we deal with it is a private matter as well. It has nothing to do with outsiders, Lian Qi replied coldly, excluding Jianchen. He tried to label Jian Chen as an outsider, so he did not have the right to interfere with the internal affairs of the Taoist sect of divine sound. Mu'er is my wife. Since my wife is involved, I need to be involved as well. Jian Chen's attitude was firm, and his voice was icy cold. He did not give in to what he said. Lian Qi snorted coldly as a pressure that belonged to a chaotic prime radiated from him. His white robes ruffled from the pressure alone. Even though he seemed aggressive, he said coldly, "Then may I ask how you plan on getting involved?" Jian Chen did not cower before Lian Qi. A powerful sword intent wrapped around him, and at that moment his eyes became utterly piercing. It was like sword intent was hidden in them. They stared down each other, which immediately made Lian Qi's eyes narrow. Lian Qi's eyes actually felt a slight, piercing pain as he stared at Jian Chen's eyes. He immediately became secretly astounded and thought, what powerful sword intent! His comprehension of the way of the sword really is close to perfection. It's much more powerful than other experts who have comprehended the way of the sword at his level. Hand over Jun Kong, or I'll never drop this matter, Jian Chen said coldly. He stared right at Lian Qi with a piercing gaze and continued, I don't want to become enemies with your Taoist sect of divine sound because of Mu'er, but if you plan on protecting Jun Kong, you can no longer blame me. Jun Kong is not someone you can protect even if you want to, even if your sect has 4 chaotic primes. With that, the expressions of Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, and Lian Qi all immediately changed. Deng Wenxin and Gu Na became stern, and Lian Qi's eyes shone with vicious light. What happened on the Cloud Moon Peak disgraced him, and he wanted to vent it all on Jian Chen. Just let Jian Chen and Jun Kong fight so that this grievance can come to an end. At this moment, an obscure voice rang out in the surroundings with absolute authority. The voice did not seem particularly old. It seemed extremely pleasant. Wind Ancestor. Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, and Lian Qi were shocked by the voice. A sliver of surprise appeared on their faces. They struggled to believe that the Wind Ancestor would give such an unexpected order. They had personally witnessed Jian Chen's strength. Even Babu, a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime, could not even fight back. It was simply ridiculous now that Jun Kong was supposed to fight him as a mere god king. Sigh, Deng Wenxin sighed gently. Her barriers still enveloped the Cloud Moon Peak, but with a wave of her hand, she brought over Jun Kong. The Wind Ancestor possessed absolute authority in the Taoist sect of divine sound. No one could defy her will. Since she had spoken, they could only carry out her orders. Gu Na and Lian Qi were gloomy. The Wind Ancestor's orders had already revealed her stance on the whole situation. She had forsaken Jun Kong. Jun Kong, do you really want to fight me? To another side, Jian Chen's expression became strange instead. Chapter 2504, Disparity. Jian Chen, do you have the courage to fight me? Jun Kong called out again, and with that, a powerful presence erupted from his body, flooding towards Jian Chen. At this moment, Jun Kong was brimming with battle intent. He was filled with confidence as if victory was within his grasp. After all, he had comprehended the heart of life and death out of the 3 concepts. Although his strength right now was not as great as Shangguan Mu'er and her zither of the demonic cry, he was definitely powerful enough to make it into the top 10 of the God King's throne. As a matter of fact, Jun Kong had a certain level of confidence about making it into the top 3 and challenging first place. This was because he had basically inherited a tiny portion of the 3rd ancestor's legacy, while most of the people who stood at first place in the past only obtained the legacies of a few regular Grand Primes. Some of them did not even have the legacies of Grand Primes. Such a legacy was nowhere close to even a part of the 3rd ancestor's legacy. Even the Wind Ancestor, who basically never interferes with the matters of the sect, has agreed to my battle with Jian Chen. It looks like Jian Chen's strength really isn't special at all, or the Wind Ancestor would have never let me fight him, thought Jun Kong. He was still under the impression that the Wind Ancestor would stand on his side. But that only makes sense. Mu'er is the 3rd ancestor's successor after all. She's far too important to our Taoist sect of divine sound. The wind ancestor probably doesn't want Jianchen alive anymore in case he'll affect Mu'er in the future. She agreed to my fight with Jianchen probably because she wants me to eliminate him. As soon as he thought of that, Jun Kong sneered inside. Mu'er, haven't you been longing for Jianchen so much in the past? Haven't you held great hopes for him in the past? Haven't you told me that I'm nowhere close to being as great as Jianchen? I'll show you just how puny your Jianchen is in my hands. Ha, you sure talk big, Jun Kong. Since you want to fight, I'll fight with you. Jianchen stared at Jun Kong like he was looking at a joke. Jun Kong was only a god king, so Jianchen really struggled to imagine where his confidence came from. Deng Wenxin and Gu Exen stared at Jun Kong strangely. Jun Kong had always been someone clever in their eyes. Since when did he become so dim? Surely it isn't the aftereffects of the intoxicating filter, right? Although Jun Kong is free from the poison now, he still hasn't recovered completely, right? Deng Wenxin and Gu Na could not help but wonder to themselves. This was the only explanation that they could think of. Even Lian Qi stared at Jun Kong with mixed feelings. Deep disappointment appeared in his eyes. He wanted to warn Jun Kong, but when he opened his mouth, he only sighed gently. He said nothing. Rumor has it that Jianchen is a vicious person, and he killed many people in the Neptunian Divine Palace. This even led to the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance and the Solitary Sword Ancestor hunting him down. Now that the Wind Ancestor has permitted the battle, Jianchen probably won't show mercy from how he's like. The Wind Ancestor is clearly sacrificing Jun Kong, thought Lian Qi. He felt powerless over the Wind Ancestor's intentions. But what I don't understand is why must the Wind Ancestor sacrifice Jun Kong? After all, he has comprehended the heart of life and death, so his future potential is unlimited. Is she sacrificing such an outstanding genius just to pacify Jianchen's anger? What's so special about Jianchen? Are we supposed to make such a great sacrifice over such a small matter? Is it because he's a part of the martial soul lineage? Is it because he has returned the Aneta Tower and established a connection with the heavenly palace of Bixing? Lian Qi was unwilling to accept this. He believed that even if Jun Kong was in the wrong, he did not deserve all this. Jun Kong cannot die. Immediately, Lian Qi made up his mind. Mu'er, don't interfere with the fight this time, Jun Kong suddenly said to Shangguan Mu'er. He seemed like he was afraid that she would suddenly save Jianchen or something. Shangguan Mu'er was clearly stunned when she heard that. She glanced at Jianchen and said with a strange expression, "All right, I won't." With that, Jun Kong made up his mind. With a flip of his hand, a jade flute appeared and pleasant music rang out slowly. The music was pleasant, where the soft sounds could pierce through anything, as if it could reach the depths of the soul. It possessed the power to control the lives of opponents, making their souls pulse, their hearts leap, and their blood flow with the music. It was as if he could control everything through the flute. This was one of the three supreme concepts of the third ancestor, the heart of life and death. It was controlling the lives of people through music. It was different from the two tunes of demonic and divine. The demonic tune out of the two tunes directly targeted the soul, while the heart of life and death controlled the lives of people. Jun Kong used his full strength right from the start, wanting to demolish Jianchen in an overwhelming manner or even kill him off. With my cultivation as a late God King, I can even affect some first heavenly layer infinite primes with the heart of life and death. I wonder how long Jianchen can last, thought Jun Kong. He was extremely confident about his current strength. He had not considered any chances of failure at all. Your skills with the flute are impressive. Jianchen was in no hurry to fight back. He stared at Jun Kong like he was looking at a joke as he remained composed. He was utterly unaffected. Jun Kong's music did indeed possess a certain level of lethality, but that was to first heavenly layer infinite primes at most. Jianchen was on a completely different level to him. The disparity was overwhelming. Besides, Jianchen's soul had fused with a strand of true chaotic force, allowing it to change and making it extremely powerful. As a result, Jun Kong's performance was completely reduced to simple music to Jianchen's ears. Sensing Jianchen's composure, Jun Kong's expression changed. He's actually unaffected. Impossible. Jun Kong was unable to accept this. In the next moment, his rhythm became rather hurried as he pushed his heart of life and death to the limit. As a result, his music seemed to possess the power of the ways of the world, interwoven with the two differing concepts of life and death. As a result, the power of his music immediately multiplied. Jun Kong, is this your limit? And you still say you want to fight me? You can't even harm me, so I really wonder where your confidence comes from, Jianchen said coldly with contempt. Jun Kong had used underhanded methods against Shengguan Mu. Jianchen would never let someone as despicable as that have an easy death. Chapter 25:05. Crushing Jun Kong. Jun Kong's anger almost reached its limit after hearing Jianchen's sneers. His eyes were icy cold, and his face had become completely warped. He felt like his face was on fire, utterly humiliated. He had openly challenged Jianchen to a fight. He was confident, absolutely confident, with his heart of life and death. He wanted to properly trample Jianchen right before Shengguan Mu, to show her just how useless the Jianchen she always longed for was. He wanted to show her the great disparity between himself and Jianchen. He was even ready to kill Jianchen because the Wind Ancestor had spoken earlier and permitted his battle with Jianchen. Originally, he believed the Wind Ancestor had allowed the battle to happen because she had complete confidence in him winning, which made Jun Kong even more confident. However, he had never thought that the final result would be so awkward. It was the exact opposite from what he imagined. Jianchen, who had always been a thorn in his backside, just stood there leisurely with his arms crossed. He did not use any treasures, nor did he take up any defenses, but the attacks Jun Kong took pride in were unable to affect him at all. Besides, he had already used his full strength, unleashing the limit of his heart of life and death. Without any exaggeration, he was using his full strength, if not more, but he just could not harm Jianchen. It seemed like Jianchen was completely immune to his sound attacks. Impossible, impossible, impossible. Why would it be like this? Why would it be like this? Jun Kong could no longer remain composed. His eyes were bloodshot as he struggled to accept reality. Jun Kong, it's best if you unleash your full strength. Attacks like this are nowhere close to harming me. Jianchen hovered above the mountains with his arms crossed. Mist would drift past him from time to time, shrouding him and making him seem mysterious. Jun Kong's face had already darkened. He did not stop playing his flute, but his teeth were gritted together tightly. He felt humiliated. After comprehending the heart of life and death, it had become his greatest trump card. The power of the concept had exceeded all the secret techniques he possessed. Now that he had unleashed all of the concept, he had used his full strength. Jianchen wanted him to unleash his full strength, but he had already reached his limit. Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, and Lian Qi watched quietly as their expressions became rather mixed. The strength that Jun Kong displayed was indeed extraordinary. Just the music itself would be enough to affect first heavenly layer infinite primes. It was already extremely impressive for a god king to achieve that. Even across the saints' world, only a handful of people could replicate such a feat. Unfortunately, he was not facing a first heavenly layer infinite prime, but someone who easily defeated a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime. As a result, the three of them felt sorry for Jun Kong. It looks like this is your full strength, Jianchen said. He shook his head gently and stared at Jun Kong like he was looking at an ant. He said, "You're far too weak, so weak that it makes me lose interest in touching you. My servant could easily kill you several times over. However, you never, ever should have used underhanded methods against Moore. Since you've done it, you must face the consequences." With that, Jianchen appeared before Jun Kong like he had teleported and directly threw a punch at him. The punch was extremely simple. It did not involve any laws. It was just raw, physical strength. However, Jianchen's chaotic body was so powerful that even his physical strength was astonishing, having reached the level of infinite prime. Bang! His punch seemed unstoppable. Before it had even arrived, the terrifying pressure it contained had already made Jun Kong pale. It was impossible for Jun Kong to avoid Jianchen's punch with his strength. The fist struck Jun Kong's flute first, and it immediately shattered, having been crushed to pieces. In return, it shot into Jun Kong's hands and chest. Jian Chen's fist continued onwards without slowing down at all, landing heavily on Jun Kong's nose. Immediately, blood sprayed out, and Jun Kong's nose was broken. It completely caved in, and a fist-sized hole appeared on his face. It was a horrendous sight. Jun Kong was knocked away by Jian Chen's punch, striking the barrier behind him heavily before rebounding back. At that moment, he only felt the world around him spin as he saw stars. Jian Chen's punch was just too powerful, even violently shaking up his soul when it struck his nose. If you had used honorable means, I would have nothing to say, but you just had to choose underhanded methods. I can't spare you because of that. Jian Chen's cold voice exploded in Jun Kong's head like thunder. Afterwards, he arrived before Jun Kong with another flash. He did not use his fists this time. Instead, he slapped Jun Kong away with his hand. The slap was astonishingly powerful, reducing half of Jun Kong's face to a mess with a crisp sound. It was all bloodied, and all his teeth were broken. Jun Kong was furious. He glared at Jian Chen venomously and opened his mouth, but he could not say anything. Jian Chen's slap had silenced him, rendering his jaw useless. Afterwards, Jian Chen attacked rapidly, using both his arms and legs to crush Jun Kong. Jun Kong became like a ball, tossed around in the air. Jian Chen controlled his power. It was just enough to injure but not kill, or he would have been able to kill Jun Kong with a flick of his finger. Jian Chen had been utterly infuriated by Jun Kong's actions. He did not want Jun Kong to die so easily. Deng Wenxin and Gu Na both struggled to watch on as they also showed some anger as they witnessed Jian Chen beat Jun Kong into a pulp. This was anger towards Jian Chen. Jun Kong was a prodigy of the Taoist sect of divine sound, yet Jian Chen was currently beating him up in the sect right in front of them. They found it rather humiliating. As for Lian Qi, his eyes shone viciously. He would clench and release his fist from time to time as his emotions fluctuated. He stared right at Jian Chen, constantly paying attention to whether Jun Kong was still alive. Shangguan Mu'er remained cold. She did not waver at all as she looked at how miserable Jun Kong had become. Back on the Tianyuan continent, Shangguan Mu'er had gained the moniker of the Heavenly Enchantress. She was never a soft-hearted person, and she could kill without a second thought. Since Jun Kong had used the intoxicating filter against her, she also wanted to kill him, but she never took action because of the kindness the Taoist sect of divine sound had shown her. Now that Jian Chen was punishing Jun Kong, she obviously would not plead for mercy. In reality, she had already saved Jun Kong once in the Neptunian Divine Palace, or Jun Kong would have died to Ming Dong's hands long ago. He would not be here. Chapter 2506. Against a chaotic prime bang. With a thud, Jian Chen's kick landed on Jun Kong's chest, crushing all his ribs. The terrifying power penetrated his body and crushed his heart as well. Jun Kong was knocked away by the kick. He crashed into a mountain below heavily and left behind a great pit. The entire mountain shook gently. Jun Kong could no longer make any sounds, and his life force was dimming. His body had basically been beaten to a pulp by Jian Chen's barrage of attacks, covering him in blood. Many regions on his were reduced to a bloody mess, and all his organs and veins were reduced to pieces or severed. His fate was extremely miserable. His wounds were so heavy that he could literally be described as at death's door. If it were not for the fact that he was a god king, if it were not for the fact that his soul remained intact, the wounds would have claimed his life long ago. However, even with that being the case, his hellish tortures still did not come to an end. Jian Chen arrived on the mountain and stood on the edge of the pit. He grabbed Jun Kong and lifted him up before slapping him again. With a crisp sound, Jun Kong was sent flying once again. His face had also been reduced to a bloody pulp, and it was no longer possible to distinguish his facial features. One of his eyes had been destroyed, and his nose was gone, replaced by a fist-sized depression in the center of his face. His mouth had been crushed as well, indistinguishable from the rest of his face. If ghosts existed in this world, Jun Kong seemed just like one right now. He was terrifying, and timid people would become covered in cold sweat from fright if they caught a glance of him. He was just too miserable. He had been reduced to Jian Chen's punching bag. Moore, Jun Kong was in the wrong, but he's still your senior in the end. Are you just going to watch him being abused like this? Lian Qi asked Moore secretly. Jun Kong's sufferings made him utterly furious. His face had become even more sunken. He wanted to save Jun Kong and teach Jian Chen a fierce lesson very much, but he felt fearful when he thought about the martial soul lineage behind Jian Chen. Even though he was a chaotic prime, the martial soul lineage was still powerful enough to strike fear within him. This was because the Taoist sect of divine sound could not stop the martial soul lineage, even with the wind ancestor who was far more powerful than him. Now, he could only place his hopes on Shangguan Moore, hoping that she would plead for mercy for her senior's sake. He's no longer my senior. He was asking for this, so you can't blame anyone else, Shangguan Moore said coldly, showing no respect towards Lian Qi. She had already begun to suspect whether the intoxicating filter came from Lian Qi. Moore, if this continues, Jun Kong will probably be beaten to death. His soul is already injured now. He can't last very long, Gu Na said to Shangguan Moore as well. She had basically watched Jun Kong grow up. Coupled with the fact that he was her partner's disciple, she did not want to see Jun Kong suffer either. Jun Kong's life has nothing to do with me. If it weren't for the fact that this is the Taoist sect of divine sound, I would have taken his life already for what he did to me earlier. Shangguan Moore's eyes were extremely cold. They were filled with heavy killing intent. Deng Wenxin said nothing. She understood the wind ancestor's intentions. Even if Jian Chen did not have the martial soul lineage backing him up, they needed to forsake Jun Kong. Because of Jun Kong, Shangguan Moore would go as far as to leave the Taoist sect of divine sound, and because of Jun Kong, Shangguan Moore had completely given up on the sect. It went without saying just how important Shangguan Moore was to the Taoist sect of divine sound. Since she held great resentment towards Jun Kong, the sect and her relationship would only grow even more distant if they insisted on protecting him. This was not an outcome any of them would want. As a result, Deng Wenxin believed that even if Shangguan Moore wanted to leave the Taoist sect of divine sound, they could not allow her to hold any resentment towards the sect at all. It looks like it's the wind ancestor who is wise. Moore has already attracted the attention of Archean clans now, so if she remained in the Taoist sect of divine sound, we'll struggle to protect her. Having her leave temporarily isn't necessarily bad. After all, her husband is Jian Chen, and he has returned the Ina Tower, committing a service of great merit to the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Moore will only benefit from that. At that moment, Deng Wenxin seemed to understand an even deeper underlying meaning. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and blood rained down from the sky. Jun Kong's arms had been cleanly severed by Jian Chen. As the limbs fell from the sky, they sprayed blood. Lian Qi had already clenched both his hands. He stared at the armless Jun Kong as his body shook gently. He was utterly furious. It's time to send you off. Jian Chen stared at the half-dead Jun Kong in the air as killing intent shone from his eyes. He extended a finger towards Jun Kong's forehead. With the finger, a streak of bright, silver-white light shot through the air, approaching Jun Kong with lightning speed. After torturing Jun Kong so much, Jian Chen began to lose interest as well, so he directly tried to end Jun Kong's life. Enough! However, at this moment, a furious bellow rang out. Lian Qi could not help but stand forward now that Jun Kong faced death. He appeared before Jun Kong like he had teleported and swung his hand casually. The great might of a chaotic prime erupted, shattering Jian Chen's attack with a single gesture. Lian Qi hovered in the air as he surrounded Jun Kong with the energy of the world there. He stared at Jian Chen coldly and said, "Jian Chen, don't push your luck." Jun Kong was his disciple, and Lian Qi had given him the intoxicating filter. As a result, Lian Qi could not allow Jun Kong to die before him. Deng Wenxin and Gu Na's expressions changed slightly when they saw this, while Shangguan Moore's eyes shone coldly. "You want to protect him?" Jian Chen stared at Lian Qi icily. Jun Kong has already been reduced to this by you, so his mistakes have been made up for now. You should stop, Lien Qi said with a sunken expression. Jianchen shook his head. Who said his mistakes have been made up for? As long as he's still alive, his mistakes remain. Are you saying that you must kill Jun Kong? Lien Qi's eyes gradually turned cold, and he said frigidly, Jun Kong is my disciple. It's fine if you want to punish him, but I cannot allow you to kill him. You might be a chaotic prime, but do you really think you can protect Jun Kong? Jianchen did not back off at all. He was extremely determined to kill Jun Kong even if a chaotic prime stood in his way. Chapter 2507. Together, Jianchen, don't go overboard. Even if Jun Kong was in the wrong, he does not deserve death. Moreover, he has already been tortured like this by you. You should know when to stop. If you insist on pushing your luck, it won't benefit you at all. Only when you know when to stop will you be able to survive in the saint's world, Lien Qi said in hopes of persuading Jianchen. After all, Jianchen's identity was different from before. He had the backing of the martial soul lineage, so Lien Qi really did not want to clash with Jianchen unless he had to. Are you threatening me? Jianchen's presence suddenly changed. Powerful sword qi radiated from him. With a flip of his hand, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways appeared in his hand, shining with enchanting starlight. If you insist on protecting Jun Kong, do not blame me for being rude, Jianchen said coldly, directly using his actions to express his intentions. Lien Qi, Guna called out gently from one side. She was worried that once the matter got out of hand, the members of the martial soul lineage would be forced to come. If it were only Jianchen, he would not be able to create that great of a ruckus in the Taoist sect of divine sound no matter how he tried. The important members of the sect did not have to get involved. However, once the martial soul lineage descended, the matter would really get out of hand. I raised Jun Kong all by himself. I've poured my heart out for him, so how can I just watch him get killed by a ruffian? Lien Qi snorted coldly. He was determined. Guna then looked at Shangguan Mu'er. She hoped that Shangguan Mu'er could stop all of this and prevent it from developing any further. Shangguan Mu'er refused to do anything. She stood on Jianchen's side. No matter what Jianchen did, she would always be with him. She would not plead for mercy. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent erupted, and it permeated the entire region. It was boundless, seemingly turning the space there into a domain of sword qi. Jianchen had taken action. He did not dare to hold back now that he faced a chaotic prime, so he unleashed his full strength right from the start. He directly used the ultimate way of the sword, controlling the region with his will, making him the supreme ruler there. What powerful sword intent! What kind of way of the sword has he comprehended? Why is it so powerful? Lien Qi, Guna, and Deng Wenxin shivered inside. They were amazed by Jianchen's way of the sword once again. They could clearly sense that the power of the way of the sword Jianchen was currently using was even more powerful than what he had displayed during his battle against Babu and Gutong. Indeed, Jianchen had not used his full strength during his battle against the two infinite primes before. He had only used part of his strength, but the situation now was different. Against a chaotic prime, he needed to use everything he had. His eyes shone with bright white light, just like two stars. With a thought, space immediately rippled, and a terrifying pulse expanded towards Jun Kong. This was one of the abilities he gained from the ultimate way of the sword he had comprehended. As long as he enveloped a region with his sword intent, he could kill those below the primordial realm with just a thought. Of course, he knew that Lien Qi would protect Jun Kong, so he would take action personally while targeting Jun Kong. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways conjured up dazzling star after dazzling star. With the appearance of each star, the sword's power grew. In an instant, 9 illusionary stars appeared. They fused with the sword, seemingly becoming part of the god artifact, causing it to shine with a hazy starlight as it suddenly stabbed towards Lien Qi. Jianchen had already unleashed the limits of the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, so he became drowned out by starlight when he stabbed out. From afar, It seemed like a line of 9 stars had turned into astonishing sword chi that ripped through space. Lien Qi's face was sunken. He grabbed Jun Kong with his left hand as his surging energy erupted, containing Jun Kong in an extremely tough barrier of energy. At the same time, the great power of laws appeared in the form of beating notes. He formed 2 lines of defense. The power of Jian Chen's ultimate way of the sword was immediately cut off. Under the protection of a chaotic prime, he was unable to kill Jun Kong with a single thought. Jian Chen, I must admit that you are extraordinary, but you are only an infinite prime in the end. The difference between infinite prime and chaotic prime is a major realm of cultivation. If I want to protect Jun Kong, you won't be able to touch him, Lien Qi said coldly. Dense energy surged in his right hand, which condensed into a hand of energy that grabbed the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. From having been restrained, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways immediately produced a clear thrum as if the sword spirit was bellowing out furiously. Afterwards, the sword exploded with light as the 9 illusionary stars consolidated. It resisted with its full power. At the same time, the chaotic force in Jian Chen surged. It flooded out from his naiden and filled every single inch of his body. He completely unleashed the power of the chaotic body. He also used the laws of strength, so his sword-wielding hands suddenly swelled. He clutched the sword with explosive power and swung it suddenly. Rip! A gash appeared in Lien Qi's hand of energy from Jian Chen's sword strike. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways broke free with endless starlight and Jian Chen swung it, attacking Lien Qi from below. The powerful sword Qi seemed to form a silver river, engulfing Lien Qi with a brilliant glow. So powerful! His strike is completely on the level of 7th heavenly layer infinite primes. It can even match 8th heavenly layer infinite primes. Deng Wenxin and Gu Na were in emotional turmoil. They had already established a very high opinion of Jian Chen, but only now did they realize that their understanding of Jian Chen was nowhere near enough. He was actually so powerful. How many years had he spent cultivating so far? Jian Chen, this is futile effort. The disparity between infinite primes and chaotic primes is just too great. Even with how extraordinary you are, it's a waste of effort. Lien Qi remained calm. A jade flute appeared in his right hand, and he swung it gently, producing a sharp whistle. It was a soundwave attack, forming a faint ripple that nullified Jian Chen's river of sword qi. Afterwards, he placed the jade flute by his mouth and played it gently. As one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of divine sound, Lien Qi was not skilled in open attacks. His strongest aspect was music. The flute rang out. Nothing could block its path, allowing it to pierce right towards its target. Jian Chen immediately felt his head grow heavy when he heard the sound of the flute. At that moment, he felt like all his energy was being sapped. He became sleepy and his body gradually became powerless. Lien Qi's way of music was on a much higher level than Jun Kong's. Even though he had not comprehended the heart of life and death, attacks from him were like the sounds of death to all infinite primes. However, at this moment, the faint tune of a zither rang out. Shengguan Mu'er had sat down in the air and taken out the zither of the demonic cry. She had begun to play it. She used her music to specially target Lien Qi's flute. As the 2 forms of sounds constantly collided, the sounds of her zither collapsed, and the sounds of the flute weakened drastically. Shengguan Mu'er should not have been able to weaken Lien Qi's flute with her cultivation as a god king, but she had comprehended the heart of the demonic and divine and possessed the zither of the demonic cry. As a result, she could interfere with Lien Qi's music to a certain extent. Mu'er! Lien Qi became filled with hatred when he witnessed her actions. He had once treated Shengguan Mu'er as the future of the Taoist sect of divine sound, nurturing and guiding her without holding back at all. However, now that she had turned against him, Lien Qi experienced a multitude of feelings. Chapter 2508. The Wind Ancestor shows herself with Shengguan Mu'er weakening Lien Qi's music. Its influence over Jian Chen was immediately reduced. However, this was only temporary. Lien Qi was a chaotic prime after all, so his music was extremely powerful. Even after it was weakened, Jianchen would only be able to last a few more seconds. Once the battle became drawn out, Jianchen would still fall unconscious from how sleepy he felt. Jianchen understood this. He stopped holding back. Sword chi surged from him as he launched an intense attack with the 9 stars conjured from the 9-star Sword of Heavenly Ways. However, his attack was only at the level of 7th Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes. At most, it had reached the level of 8th Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime. It was still nothing before Lian Qi, who had become a chaotic prime many years ago. Lian Qi hovered still in the air. He continued to blow his flute gently, except it had suddenly become rather sharp. As the sharp sound rang out, visible sound waves shot out like swords, colliding with Jianchen's 9-star Sword of Heavenly Ways. Jianchen's attack collapsed with a boom once again. It was easily dispersed. They were on completely different levels, and the huge difference could not be made up for. However, the moment the two attacks collided, Jianchen sneered. His gaze immediately became stunning as heavy killing intent shone. A strand of finger-sized, silver-white sword chi silently appeared above his head. Supreme sword intent immediately filled the surroundings the moment it appeared. The sword chi was so powerful that it could shake up the world, causing the expressions of Lian Qi, Deng Wenxin, and Gu Na to change. Lian Qi's eyes narrowed as he faced Jianchen. His indifferent expression immediately became serious. He sensed an intense threat from the strand of sword chi. The tiny strand of sword chi could definitely harm him. Oh no! Lian Qi became extremely vigilant. It was also at this moment that the strand of sword chi erupted with unmatched speed. It shot through the air, surpassing the limits of space and vanishing with a flash. It was so fast that it shocked Lian Qi. However, the strand of sword chi did not shoot towards Lian Qi. Instead, it approached Jun Kong, who had been under Lian Qi's protection. In an instant, the sword chi arrived before Jun Kong's face. It was just too fast, so Lian Qi could not stop it even if he tried. Powerful energy and laws of music revolved around Jun Kong, protecting him. However, the sword chi directly bypassed these defenses and pierced through space, shooting right into Jun Kong's head. Bang! Jun Kong's head immediately exploded. His entire head had vanished, and he was reduced to a headless corpse. His soul had dispersed the moment the sword chi struck. Jun Kong died. The profound sword chi was just too powerful. Now that Jianchen had refined his 4th strand of profound sword chi, every single one of them was even more powerful than before. It could directly kill weaker infinite primes, so it was impossible for Jun Kong's head to remain intact as a mere god king. He died with an incomplete corpse. The suddenness shocked Deng Wenxin, Gu Na, and Lian Qi. They all stared at Jun Kong's corpse blankly as they struggled to accept the entire matter. Jianchen had actually managed to kill Jun Kong despite the protection of a chaotic prime. They were deeply stunned by his abilities and methods. Konger! Only a while later did Lian Qi called out sorrowfully. He was grief-stricken. Jun Kong was the prodigy he had raised by pouring his heart out. He had attempted the God King's throne and become a supreme God King, and then he had comprehended the third ancestor's heart of life and death. He was Lian Qi's pride, and Lian Qi held high hopes for him. Now that he had just watched Jun Kong die a miserable death right before him, he struggled to accept it. But very soon, a surging presence erupted from Lian Qi. Jun Kong's death had completely infuriated him. Heavy killing intent rose up from the bottom of his heart. Jianchen. Lian Qi stared right at Jianchen with deep hatred. He was unable to hide his killing intent. Jianchen stood there with his sword. He stared right back at Lian Qi in a piercing manner and showed no fear. He said coldly, his fate was already set in stone the moment he used the intoxicating filter against Mua. Jun Kong had it coming, or maybe I should say that you, as his master, didn't watch over him properly. Jianchen secretly became cautious, ready to contact the Martial Soul Mountain at any time. When he left the Martial Soul Mountain, he had learnt a corresponding secret technique that he could use to send a distress signal to the Martial Soul Mountain with a single thought. In just a few seconds the people of the Martial Soul lineage would arrive. It was also because of the martial soul mountain that Jianchen dared to act so fearlessly in the Taoist sect of divine sound, showing no fear towards chaotic primes and even killing someone before them. Lian Qi said nothing. At that moment, he had basically become an enraged beast, almost losing all rationality. He stared at Jianchen fiercely as killing intent rose from him. A terrifying presence permeated the surroundings. Jun Kong is dead, and you vented your anger. Jianchen, are you satisfied now? At this moment, an obscure voice rang out. With that, a beautiful woman silently appeared before Jianchen. She seemed to be in her 30s, but she still possessed astonishing beauty. Her presence was otherworldly, and she was filled with the energy of youth. Wind Ancestor. Deng Wenxin and Gu Na immediately clasped their fists and bowed when they saw the woman. Even Lian Qi held back on his presence slightly, greeting her as his senior. In the Taoist sect of divine sound, the Wind Ancestor definitely held supreme authority. Not only did she possess extremely great strength, making her the most powerful in the sect, but she was also a figure who came from the same age as the third ancestor. In the past, she had been the third ancestor's senior, which made her seniority frightening. The Wind Ancestor had shown herself, and she happened to be standing in an extremely clever position, right between Jianchen and Lian Qi. Perhaps she wanted to separate them. Moor greets the Wind Ancestor. At this moment, Shangguan Moor arrived beside Jianchen and bowed towards the Wind Ancestor. The Wind Ancestor looked at Shangguan Moor. Her gaze was gentle. Moor, I spent a majority of my time in seclusion and did not manage the affairs of the sect, so I've probably made you suffer quite a lot. I hope you don't distance yourself from the sect. The Taoist sect of divine sound is your second home. Thank you for your concern, Wind Ancestor. Jun Kong is already dead, so my grievances with him have come to an end, said Shangguan Moor. The Wind Ancestor nodded. She did not even glance at Jun Kong's corpse as if she did not care about him at all. Instead, she said to Gu Na and Lian Qi, there are still some matters I want to talk to Moor and Jianchen about alone, so you two are dismissed. Neither Gu Na nor Lian Qi dared to disobey the Wind Ancestor's orders. Lian Qi glanced at Jianchen coldly before leaving with Gu Na and Jun Kong's corpse. Chapter 2509. A happy pair. The powerful barrier remained erected over the Cloud Moon Peak, concealing everything happening in there from the regular disciples of the Taoist sect of divine sound. Jianchen, Shangguan Moor, Deng Wenxin, and the Wind Ancestor stood in the air within the barrier. The atmosphere was no longer as nervous before, where battle could break out at any moment. It clearly seemed very peaceful. The Wind Ancestor looked at Shangguan Moor gently. Her gaze contained a sliver of mixed emotions. She thought of her talented, clever junior who had pushed the Taoist sect of divine sound to a glorious peak alone. Shangguan Moor's talent was extraordinary. She had only come to the Taoist sect of divine sound recently, yet she had already reached peak God King. She even possessed the power to harm infinite primes, and she was the only successor of her junior. The Wind Ancestor became absent-minded over this. It was as if she was witnessing her junior during her growth again. Shangguan Moor was a splitting image of what her junior went through as she matured. Moor, the responsibility for all that you went through during these years in the Taoist sect of divine sound is on me. It's all because I spent all of my time in seclusion and rarely paid attention to the matters of the sect that this happened. May I ask if you've ever resented the Taoist sect of divine sound? The Wind Ancestor asked softly. Due to the zither of the demonic cry, she treated Shangguan Moor just like her junior. She and her junior, the third ancestor, were extremely close, just like sisters. The death of the third ancestor had filled her with grief and sorrow as well. Now that so many years had passed, and her junior's only successor had appeared, conjuring up an image of the past third ancestor, the Wind Ancestor treated Shangguan Moor differently. Shangguan Moor shook her head and replied, the Taoist sect of divine sound has remade me. I don't want personal grievances to affect the entire sect. Originally, Shangguan Moor had completely given up on the Taoist sect of divine sound, but the wind ancestor's behavior had lit up a sliver of hope in her. After all, Lian Qi was not the one in charge of the sect. The wind ancestor was the person truly in control. As long as you think like that, I don't have to worry. The wind ancestor smiled as if all her worries had finally vanished. At this moment, the wind ancestor became serious and continued, "Moore, matters about you have already spread across the saints' world. Your identity as the successor of the third ancestor has raised the attention of many peak sects in the saints' world. Even a few Archean clans have become interested, so the Taoist sect of Divine Sound really isn't an appropriate place for you to stay in. The sect is just far too puny in the eyes of those peak organizations or even Archean clans. It's very difficult for the sect to protect you, so you can leave the sect temporarily, but you can't break away from the sect." Afterwards, the wind ancestor looked at Jianchen and said, "Jianchen, I'll leave Moore to you now. I believe that you can protect her well, senior, don't worry. I will definitely protect Moore. Even if Archean clans become interested in her, I won't let anything happen to her," Jianchen swore. He still had a lot of merit with the heavenly palace of Bixing, so he could directly send her there if worst came to worst. The heavenly palace of Bixing had the first majesty, so even the Archean clans would not turn on the heavenly palace of Bixing over a small matter like this. Besides, Jianchen could sense the wind ancestor's treatment of Shangguan Moore from what she said. It was sincere concern, which changed his impression of the Taoist sect of Divine Sound slightly. After the wind ancestor's stern warning, Jianchen clasped his fist and bid farewell before leaving the sect with Shangguan Moore. Jianchen and Shangguan Moore held hands as they flew steadily in the air. They directly approached a nearby interplanar teleportation formation. Jianchen faced the wind as the landscape below him receded rapidly. He looked at the beauty beside him as he felt calmer than he had ever felt in the past. After they separated on the cloud plane, many years had passed before he finally arrived on the Skyfire plane through his own strength, fetching Shangguan Moore from the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. It was like removing something that weighed on his heart, which made him feel at great ease. He felt like a missing part of his mind had been filled up, making him gradually feel complete again. Suddenly, Jianchen's soul shuddered. At that moment, a sliver of understanding suddenly appeared in mind like a flash of an idea, allowing him to grasp something immediately. Afterwards, Jianchen's soul rapidly swelled and strengthened. His comprehension of the way of the sword rapidly deepened as well. Sword immortal, sword immortal. What is immortal? Immortal is freedom and liberation. Immortal is also the world, this universe, Jianchen understood. In that instant, his way of the sword grew. Even though he did not break through, he had reached the peak of the minor achievement of sword immortal. He was only a step away from the partial achievement of sword immortal now. Reuniting with Shangguan Moore and fetching her was a simple matter, but it had filled up a hole in Jianchen's heart, allowing him to make a small breakthrough. Now, his comprehension of the way of the sword was even deeper, having surpassed what he possessed when he fought Lian Qi in the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. He was extremely close to the partial achievement of sword immortal now. It's just a pity that I'm a step off. If I could reach the partial achievement of sword immortal, I wonder if I'll be able to make progress with my chaotic body again. Jianchen felt a slight tinge of pity. He was currently at the 14th layer of the chaotic body. He was very eager for the battle prowess of the 15th layer. Unfortunately, he did not reach the partial achievement of sword immortal in the end. Restrained by his comprehension, he would not be able to break through with the chaotic body. Jianchen, you've broken through again? Shangguan Moore sensed Jianchen's abnormality. I've made some progress. Jianchen nodded. It could be considered as instantaneous comprehension this time, completed in a single moment. It did not take up any time at all. Moore, let's return to the cloud plane, to the Tianyuan clan. That's where our first home in the Saints' world stands. Jianchen held her hand and said softly. Shangguan Moore nodded. Jianchen had single-handedly created the Tianyuan clan in the Dong'an province, so she also held special feelings towards the Tianyuan clan. This feeling was the feeling of home. At the same time, a sense of belonging. Yeah. Let's go home, Shengguan Mu'er said gently. Within the Taoist sect of divine sound, Lian Qi stood on a mountain as his eyes shone with a stunning light. He stared right outside the sect. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through space, allowing him to see Jianchen and Shengguan Mu'er clearly. You killed my disciple. Jianchen, this debt definitely won't just end here, Lian Qi said through gritted teeth. His face was extremely sunken and killing intent filled his eyes. Chapter 25:10. The Tao Clan. In the vast sea of stars in the Saints' world, there was a galaxy composed of millions of resplendent stars and meteors. It shone with dazzling light, revolving slowly with the vibes of the ways. A galaxy composed of millions of stars was basically nothing in the vast cosmos because there were countless galaxies composed of billions of stars there. However, this small galaxy was very extraordinary. As it revolved, it gave off a mysterious power. It followed the trajectory of the ways and could interfere with the operation of the ways. Clearly, the small galaxy was a colossal formation. A colossal formation composed of millions of stars and meteors. At the center of the galaxy was a green planet brimming with life. Like a precious gemstone, it was protected by the colossal formation. Anyone could tell that the formation in outer space protected this green planet at the center. The green planet was not large. It did not make it into the ranks of the 81 great planets of the Saints' world, but it gave off a terrifying presence that could shake up the universe. This was the ancestral lands of the Tao clan, one of the Archean clans in the Saints' world. The Tao clan had survived from the previous aeon, and it had been through countless changes. It was already very difficult to examine how long they had existed. Having existed for so long, the Tao clan's heritage ran extremely deep. After countless years of development, cities now stood on the green planet where billions of cultivators lived. All of them belonged to the Tao clan. However, not all of them were members of the clan or possessed the bloodline of the Tao clan. 99% of them were servants and the descendants left behind by servants brought in from outside. There were very few people who truly inherited the bloodline of the Tao clan. There would always be a statue in every city. An old man could be roughly made out from the statue, but his facial features were blurry as if they were obscured by a dense mist. However, these statues all possessed a supreme presence as if they were looking down on the world. He was the founding ancestor of the Tao clan. He did not belong to the current aeon and was instead a supreme figure who had vanished from the long river of history, the Tao Union Grand Exalt. Several old men sat together in a majestic hall within the ancestral lands of the Tao clan, staring below emotionlessly. The injured Tao Gongming, Babu, and Gutong stood below extremely cautiously. Even though Babu and Gutong were infinite primes, and even if they were people who possessed status in the Saints' world, infinite primes were nothing special in the Tao clan that had existed since ancient times. That is how everything happened. Great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, grandfather, you have to stand up for your grandson. Tao Gongming narrated what he went through in the Taoist sect of divine sound after warping some truths, placing all the blame on Jianchen and the Taoist sect of divine sound. Gutong, Babu, is that correct? One of the old men asked Gutong and Babu. The two of them looked at each other and replied, "That's roughly it. Jianchen was indeed the one who injured us." Jianchen, the light in the eyes of the old men flickered as they murmured. Immediately, information about Jianchen appeared in their heads. After a moment of pause, Babu continued, "And it seems like Shengguan Mu'er is already Jianchen's wife." The old men all frowned slightly when they heard that. One of them said gently, "Jianchen and Shengguan Mu'er are actually a couple? That'll be rather troublesome. It wouldn't be a problem if it were someone else, but this Jianchen has already returned the Anata Tower. He has the backing of the heavenly palace of Bishing, so if we lay our hands on him, we'll probably come into conflict with the heavenly palace of Bishing. Since he's related to the heavenly palace of Bishing, we can't touch him. Our branch never had a particularly great status in the clan. If we really end up in conflict with the heavenly palace of Bishing, we won't be able to bear the consequences. Our branch is mainly responsible for collecting information across the Saints' world. Originally, we thought we could take advantage of the fact that we learnt Shangguan Moor was the third ancestor's successor first and have Gongming marry her, allowing the status of our branch to rise in the sect, but it really seems like it's not for us. It's time for us to report this. The ancestor was one of the people who courted the third ancestor in the past. Now that the third ancestor's successor has appeared, we can't keep the news hidden. The old men did not mention anything about avenging Dao Gongming because the heavenly palace of Bisheng stood behind Jianqin. This had surpassed the limits of what they could handle. After leaving the hall, Dao Gongming was in a horrible mood. He said in resentment, "Goddamn heavenly palace of Bisheng. Jianqin injured us to such a degree, so are we just supposed to spare him? Are we supposed to just drop this matter? Young master, if you want revenge, you can just disclose this matter to someone else. Our branch cannot afford to offend the heavenly palace of Bisheng, but there are people who can," Babu said at this moment. Dao Gongming's eyes lit up from that. "Do you have someone good in mind?" "The foster son of the 9 Brilliance Star Lord from the Star Brilliance Plane, the young Star Lord," replied Babu. Elsewhere, Jianqin and Shangguan Moor had already left the Skyfire plane through a teleportation formation. They constantly passed through teleportation formations as they headed towards the cloud plane. Jianqin no longer lacked 5-colored divine crystals. Ever since he destroyed the Gloomwater sect, he had obtained a lot of 5-colored divine crystals from the space rings of the infinite primes, as well as the colored divine crystals stored in the water cloud hall. Now, Jianqin was basically filthy rich. He no longer needed to treat the 5-colored divine crystals needed for teleportation formations seriously. After several teleportations, crossing through plane after plane, the two of them finally arrived at their destination, the cloud plane. The teleportation formation in a bustling city in the central region of the cloud plane shone with blinding light, and Jianqin and Shangguan Moor appeared. Shangguan Moor wore a veil again, covering up her great beauty. Jianqin did not use his true appearance either, replacing it with an unfamiliar face through Emo Tianyun's mask. After leaving several decades ago, he had no idea about the situation of the cloud plane. He only planned on using his true appearance after understanding the situation of the entire plane. "Cloud plane, I've finally returned. I wonder how the Tianyuan clan is doing now and whether Ming Dong is still here." Jianqin felt a strange sense of closeness and familiarity as he stared at the unfamiliar land of the central region. After all, this was a part of the cloud plane. "And Huayan, vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, you forced me off the cloud plane in the past. I've finally returned today. I will have my revenge." Jianqin looked in the direction of the cloud plane. He seemed to see the Pingtian Empire and the Dong'an province. However, in the next moment he showed some sorrow. He had left the cloud plane with Kaya in the past, but Kaya was gone forever now. Chapter 2511. Member of the Tianyuan clan, I never thought the only everlasting empire on the cloud plane would vanish. It was reduced to a bottomless pit by a huge hand that fell from the sky. He destroyed the Tian Empire with a single strike, where even the heavenless demon Exalt, a 4th heavenly layer Grand Prime, died. This person really is so powerful. Now, the cloud plane is occupied by the Righteous Alliance and the Four Symbols Alliance. The Righteous Alliance have occupied the central, eastern, western, and northern regions. The Four Symbols Alliance only occupies the southern region. Jianqin and Shangguan Moor sat before each other in an inn within a city as they listened to the conversations of the cultivators. They gained a rough understanding about the overall situation of the cloud plane. There's no doubt that the hand that destroyed the Tian Empire belonged to Emo Tianyun. Emo Tianyun really is powerful. Even the infamous Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance wasn't his opponent, and he helped me take back a droplet of my blood from him. Even the heavenless demon Exalt was defeated by Senior Emo Tianyun with a single palm strike. Jianqin thought. At the same time, he felt extremely curious about what heavenly layer Emo Tianyun had reached as a Grand Prime. After a short while, Jianqin and Shangguan Moor stood up a left. This was the central region, so the news that they obtained was basically all about the destruction of the Tian Empire. The Tian Empire was an everlasting empire after all. Even though it was destroyed several decades ago, it was still a hot topic among the cultivators. Jian Chen had yet to obtain any information on the southern region and the Tian Yuan clan so far. He had no idea whether it was because the Tian Yuan clan was still nameless, or if it were because these cultivators were just too weak to come across any news about it. Mu'er, let's go to the southern region and return to the Tian Yuan clan. Jian Chen held Shangguan Mu'er's hand and directly made his way towards a regional teleportation formation. He already knew the Four Symbols Alliance had occupied the southern region. The Tian Yuan clan and Ping Tian Empire were both in the southern region, so he always felt worried for the clan. Over a dozen regional teleportation formations stood in the center of the city, heavily guarded by soldiers. The teleportation formations constantly flickered, and cultivators poured in and out. It was extremely busy. Jian Chen and Shangguan Mu'er directly made their way towards an empty teleportation formation. Even though Jian Chen could cross from the central region to the southern region with his speed now, it would still not be as fast as taking a teleportation formation. However, just when they were about to enter a teleportation formation, a bloody, middle-aged man rushed over from the distance and jumped into the teleportation formation before Jian Chen and Shangguan Mu'er. He called out in a hurry, "To the southern region. Send me to the southern region." The middle-aged man was a god king, and it was obvious that he was running for his life. His body was covered with wounds, and he had been dyed red with blood. The old man who watched over the teleportation formation was clearly accustomed to this. After accepting the fee, he activated the teleportation formation. Stop the teleportation. He killed a member of our Mantua clan. Please do it for the sake of the Mantua clan and not teleport him away. At this moment, 4 god kings in the same uniform rushed over, and one of them called out. The old man immediately paused when he heard what the people of the Mantua clan said. He glanced at the bloody, middle-aged man before looking at the 4 god kings of the Mantua clan. He did not end up activating the teleportation formation. The Mantua clan had quite the reputation in this city. Most importantly, the young lady of the Mantua clan had close ties with the young lady of the clan in charge of the teleportation formations here, the Fire God clan. As a result, even though the Mantua clan was not a peak clan on the Cloud Plain, a few members of the Fire God clan still respected them. The expression of the God King in the teleportation formation changed drastically when he saw how he would not be teleported away. Wu Feng, do you plan on running after killing someone from our Mantua clan? You underestimate us too much. The 4 God Kings of the Mantua clan surrounded Wu Feng in the teleportation formation. They brimmed with killing intent. Zhou Jian of your Mantua clan killed my partner. This is a personal grievance between me and him. I definitely have no intentions of provoking the Mantua clan. I hope you can look into this matter, Wu Feng said sternly as he stood in the teleportation formation. He knew that there was no chance for him to escape anymore now that the people of the Mantua clan had caught up to him. I don't care what your relationship with Zhou Jian is. Since Zhou Jian is a guest of our Mantua clan, that makes him a member of our Mantua clan. You killed a guest of the Mantua clan, so that is provoking our Mantuan clan. Wu Feng, come with us obediently. Don't make us take action, a god king said coldly. The region of the teleportation formations had always been busy, so this matter obviously attracted the attention of many people. In just a short moment, many cultivators gathered nearby. Jian Chen and Shangguan Mu'er happened to be in the crowd. They watched this matter unfold. Wu Feng's expression became ugly. Once he went to the Mantua clan with them, he was dead for sure. Wu Feng, will give you 10 seconds to surrender yourself, or we'll take action. You should know what will happen when it comes to that, said one of the God Kings, giving a final ultimatum. All right, I'll surrender. Wu Feng remained conflicted for quite a while before making up his mind. Afterwards, he charged into the sky, fleeing into the distance. You're looking to die. The gaze of a god king from the Mantua clan turned cold. He immediately clenched his hand, and a powerful stream of energy shot out, knocking Wu Feng from the sky. Wu Feng was only a mid-god king, while the God King of the Mantua clan had already reached peak God King. Coupled with how Wu Feng was already injured, he was obviously not his opponent. "Capture him and take him back to the clan to encourage," said the God King from the Mantua clan coldly. Immediately, someone produced a rope of energy and tied up Wu Feng. At this moment, a young man who seemed to be in his 20s appeared there from a teleportation formation. As soon as he saw the captured Wu Feng, he became furious. "Stop! Let go of my father!" The young man bellowed out furiously. He shot off like an arrow, stopping the God Kings who were about to leave with Wu Feng. "You're a mere overgod and you," said one of the God King frigidly as his face turned cold. However, in the next moment, he saw the tablet hanging from the young man's waist, and his expression immediately changed slightly. He forcefully shut himself up. An identity token from the Tian Yuan clan. The God King who had heavily injured Wu Feng saw the tablet on the young man's waist, and his expression changed as well. Chapter 25:12. Renown at the start. The four God Kings from the Mantua clan did not take the young man seriously. He was only an overgod, and he was Wu Feng's child. He was both weak and backgroundless. The life of someone as puny as him would be at their discretion. They did not have to worry about any consequences. However, now that they saw the medallion hanging from the young man's waist, the expressions of all four changed. They frowned and became extremely careful. "Let go of my father," roared the young man. As he stared at the pale-faced and heavily injured Wu Feng, he felt furious. Killing intent filled his mind. However, he did not act carelessly. He knew the four of them were God Kings, far more powerful than what an overgod like him could handle. "Xiao, go. Don't worry about me." Wu Feng also discovered his son. His expression changed drastically. He failed to notice the medallion from the Tian Yuan clan. However, since his child had suddenly appeared, the people of the Mantua clan would never spare him. "It was all my fault for killing Zhou Jian. I'll go back with you for the punishment, but please spare my son." "My son is innocent," Wu Feng called out in a hurry as he urged Wu Xiaohe to escape. "Don't worry, father. Even if they were 100 times bolder, they wouldn't dare to touch a hair on me." Wu Xiaohe was fearless and extremely confident. He grabbed the medallion from the Tian Yuan clan and showed it off to everyone. "Do you see? This is an identity token from the Tian Yuan clan. I don't think there's anyone who's bold enough to offend people of the Tian Yuan clan on the current cloud plane. I've already joined the Tian Yuan clan. I've become one of their members. According to the rules of the Tian Yuan clan, the family of all members will receive the care and protection of the clan." Wu Xiaohe announced his identity. He spoke very loudly, where his voice rang across half the city. He attracted the attention of countless people. "It's true. It really is an identity medallion from the Tian Yuan clan. I never thought he would have actually joined the Tian Yuan clan. The Tian Yuan clan is so difficult to join. Their conditions are far too great. Many God Kings have tried to join, but they've been turned down at the doorstep." "Only God Kings? I heard that 5 years ago, a primordial realm expert wanted to join the Tian Yuan clan and serve them, but he was turned away in the end. The reason that the Tian Yuan clan gave was that the primordial realm expert had committed many evil deeds and despicable acts in the past. He was humiliated by the Tian Yuan clan in such a manner, but he never dared to lose his temper. The Tian Yuan clan is an extremely special small clan on the cloud plane. They take up a tiny piece of land, and I heard that they're not on a particularly grand scale either, but neither of the two great alliances dare to offend them. Many cultivators discussed in the surroundings. They looked at the medallion in Wu Xiaohe's hand, and all of them revealed looks of envy. Of course, only an extremely small number of people in the crowd knew about the Tian Yuan clan. They either possessed a certain level of status, or they were extremely well-versed with information. Most of them did not know how special the Tian Yuan clan. This was the central region after all. It would be very difficult for regular cultivators to learn about the more secretive matters from the southern region. My son has actually joined the Tian Yuan clan. The Tian Yuan clan. Wu Feng became completely stunned. He was a God King, so he knew quite a lot. He naturally knew about the status that the Tianyuan clan possessed on the Cloud Plain. They were a special clan that even the two alliances dared not offend. He even knew that when Mo Xingfeng of the Tianyuan clan inherited the throne of the Pingtian Empire a few decades ago, both the Four Symbols Alliance and Righteous Alliance had sent people bearing rich gifts. The coronation ceremony for the tiny Pingtian Empire, basically nameless a century ago, received such attention from the two supreme rulers of the Cloud Plain. They even congratulated the Pingtian Empire in such an amicable manner. This was more than enough to demonstrate the extraordinariness of the Tianyuan clan. All of this happened because Mo Xingfeng was one of the founding members of the Tianyuan clan. Wu Xiaohe held the medallion high in the air as he coldly said to the four god kings from the Mantua clan, "My father is under the protection of the Tianyuan clan now, but you treat him like this publicly. You look down on the Tianyuan clan. You are provoking the Tianyuan clan. Do you want to become enemies of the Tianyuan clan?" Wu Xiaohe said powerfully. His attitude was very forceful, and his voice rang out everywhere. He faced off against the four god kings as he held the medallion. He acted reasonably and did not go overboard. The faces of the four god kings changed. The leading god king immediately called out, "Don't you blabber nonsense. Our Mantua clan has always been on good terms with the Tianyuan clan. We send people to the southern region to visit the Tianyuan clan every year. We definitely have no intentions of provoking them." The four god kings of the Mantua clan were clearly rather afraid. They possessed some status in the Mantua clan, so they knew more than Wu Feng. They knew that they could never afford to offend the Tianyuan clan. At the same time, they secretly sent a message to the patriarch of the Mantua clan. They wanted him to come and settle this matter, as they were afraid that they would mishandle it and fall out with the Tianyuan clan. They would not be able to bear the consequences of something like that. Jian Chen and Shengguan Mu'er glanced at each other in the crowd. They saw each other's deep shock. Neither of them would have imagined that the Tianyuan clan that had always remained hunkered down in the Dong'an province would possess such deterrent power after several dozen years. Even a few large clans in the central region dared not offend them. They even began to suspect that the Tianyuan clan they were hearing about just happened to share the same name as the Tianyuan clan in the Pingtian Empire. "It looks like the Tianyuan clan has been better off than I imagined," thought Jian Chen. He had always worried about the Tianyuan clan, but now that he had witnessed just how awe-inspiring the clan was, he completely stopped worrying. Afterwards, the patriarch of the Mantua clan personally arrived. After understanding everything, he publicly punished the four god kings who chased Wu Feng. He even lowered himself to apologize to Wu Feng and Wu Xiaohe. He even gifted them god-tier pills for Wu Feng. He did not even mention the matter about Wu Feng killing a guest of the Mantua clan. In the end, Wu Feng's situation of certain doom was easily resolved by his son taking out the medallion from the Tianyuan clan. Let's go back to the southern region and see what the Tianyuan clan has become. Jian Chen smiled relaxedly and left the central region with Shengguan Mu'er through a teleportation formation. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.